Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. So I make that 6 o'clock. So we should be live. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first virtual Cabinet meeting for Colchester Borough Council. This is a Cabinet meeting, and I will explain the role of the Cabinet shortly. So welcome to any of the public who are watching the live stream on YouTube, and welcome to the councillors that are here signed into the Zoom meeting, and to my Cabinet members as well, and to the officers supporting us this evening. This meeting is being held remotely in line with the provisions of the regulations recently introduced by the government to enable local government decision-making meetings to be held remotely. The meeting is being broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. The meeting will also be available to view on the Council's YouTube channel afterwards. So I am the chairman of this panel of Cabinet as leader of the Council. So I'm Councillor Mark Corey, leader of the Council and representative for Wivenhoe Ward. I'll go around the Cabinet to ask them to introduce themselves, firstly with the Deputy Leader of the Council, Julie.
Good evening, Leader and fellow councillors and members of the public that may be listening in. I'm Deputy Leader of the Council and I'm Cabinet member for Culture, Performance and the Local Plan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Fox. I'm the Cabinet member for Housing.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Teresa Higgins. I'm the portfolio holder for Commercial Services. Just to say, contrary to minute 449, I am back because I couldn't retire because there were no elections.
Thank you. Councillor Goss.
Martin Goss, I'm the councillor in Mile End and I'm also the portfolio holder for Waste, Transport and Environment.
Councillor King, and then Lily, and then Luxembourg.
Councillor David King, Mile End Ward, Cabinet member for Business and Resources.
Mike Lilly, portfolio holder for Communities, Public Safety, Health and Wellbeing.
Councillor Luxembourg, portfolio holder for Customers and ward member for Wivenhoe.
Thank you all. And I also want to invite some of the key officers who are supporting us this evening. First of all, to the Chief Executive, Adrian.
Good evening, Cabinet, members of the public. Adrian Pritchard, Chief Executive of the Borough Council.
The Monitoring Officer. Andrew, are you there? I do hope we have Andrew. Are you having trouble with the technology? I can come back to you. Please do shout if...
he was in the call earlier, Chairman. We will try.
He was there. He is unmuted now, but we just can't hear him. So I'll go to you, Richard. Richard
Clifford, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll be able to sort out the technology with Andrew. He may need to log in and out, but he is important because Andrew, as the monitoring officer, will count the votes, will ensure that that runs smoothly. I can just about hear you. The connection needs to improve somewhat. Thank you. Okay, so councillors and officers taking part in the in the meeting are required to mute their microphones when they're not speaking. Please activate the microphone when you're invited to speak, and in order to indicate speaking and wanting to speak, please raise your hand. Use the raise hand function on the participants icon at the bottom. Make sure the microphone is turned off once you've finished speaking, please. Visiting councillors and officers not taking an active part in the meeting are requested to turn off their cameras until they are invited to speak, please. And when speaking, please speak clearly and slowly. I also want to ensure, for accessibility purposes, for people who are listening in, that we take time to ensure when we make a decision, people understand what we are talking about. So please do raise your hand using the participants button down the bottom. The provisions in the Constitution around the timings of breaks will apply to this meeting as well. Can members please give notice to the chairman if they need to move away from the screen, even for very short periods, and blank your screen and mute your microphone. So, an introduction to the work of the Cabinet. For the benefit of the members of the public, I would like to explain that the Cabinet is the main executive body of the Council. It is responsible for the day-to-day decision-making on all Council services and also makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet is made up of 8 councillors who have introduced themselves this evening, and they each have a responsibility for a particular range of services. Moving on to item 2, urgent items. Richard, are there any?
There are no urgent items, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. At this point, in terms of urgency, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect and have a moment's pause to reflect on 2 things. Firstly, those that we have lost, members of families and friends who we've lost during this crisis and the coronavirus period. And also at the moment, something that is urgent in our world is the effects of the American troubles with racism. And I want to ensure that in this moment, we also stand supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and supporting those and sadly reflecting on those who have lost their lives due to the harm over there at the moment. So if we just take a moment to reflect, please. Thank you. So anyone who just joined us and saw us pausing for a moment, that was to reflect upon the crisis and the coronavirus crisis and how that's affected loved ones, families across the country, but also reflecting at this time to pay respects for those who have lost their lives, George Floyd and others over in America and the sad troubles they're having there, and to pay our respects and to support, from my personal opinion, the Black Lives Matter campaign. Moving on, declarations of interest is item 3. I invite Cabinet members to declare any relevant interest for this evening. If a member declares a disclosable pecuniary interest, indicate to the Democratic Services Officer, and they will ensure that they can be removed from the meeting if that's the right thing to do, be placed in a waiting room for a duration of the item. So please indicate if you do have any issues. I have 2 hands raised. So Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare that I am the Council's representative director on the NEGC board, and that will be touched upon later in the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor King. If you could lower your
Chairman, I
hand.
can confirm that that's a non-pecuniary interest, Chairman.
So Councillor King can remain. Yep.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Luxford Vaughan, please.
I think it's a pecuniary interest in as much that I'm a member of Wivenhoe Town Council and a family member of Wivenhoe Cricket Club, and both have received business support grants.
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you, Leader. I need to declare I'm an employee of Community 360, and they are mentioned within the report.
Thank you. Adam mentioned very positively with the work that they've been doing. Thank you. Please lower hands. If not, I will try and do that as well, so it doesn't confuse matters going forward. And that seems to be all of those who want to declare an interest. Can I just check that Andrew Weavers, the monitoring officer, has come back? Are we able to hear you, Andrew?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairman, apologies for that. I could hear you, but you couldn't hear me.
Fantastic, we can now hear you. It's so important to have you. Okay, we can now move on to some of the main items. And the minutes of the last meeting, item 4, the minutes from the meeting of the 11th of March 2020. Can we ensure that these minutes are correct? Hopefully you have been able to check those. I'll see if there's any raised hands for any items that are inaccurate or you want to ensure are checked. I cannot see any. So can I move to the monitoring officer, Andrew? Now we have you here to just vote those minutes through, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll call your name out, and if you could say whether you're for or against the minutes, please. Councillor Fox?
For.
For. Councillor Goss?
For.
For. Councillor Higgins?
For.
For. Councillor King?
For.
For. Councillor Lilly?
For.
For. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan?
For.
For. Councillor Young?
For.
Councillor Corey?
For.
For. That's unanimous, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good to get the first vote through. Okay, moving on to item 5, have your say. And just to explain, at this point in our proceedings and moving to virtual meetings, we're allowing as many public submissions as possible. We publish the papers days in advance so that people have a chance to go through them, and then they're able to submit a submission in writing up to 500 words. And we have taken a number of submissions. So I'll move first of all to a submission from Andy Hamilton in writing, and invite Pam Donnelly, please, to read that item out to us.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. For decades, Spring Lane Nursery has been abandoned by its owners, Colchester Council. Yes, the concrete forecourt is used by the council gardening contractor, but the 2.5 acres beyond is unused. Over the years, I have wanted to see the land used to supply bedding plants for public areas. After support from a councillor, I visited Spring Lane Nursery on November the 27th, 2019, and met Parks and Recreation Officer Steve Collis. Unfortunately, since then, he has not responded to emails to Steve Collis at colchester.gov.uk. Using my garden, I grow about 2,000 bedding plants twice a year for 6 public areas, and since lockdown, elderly neighbours, isolating, and 4 care homes. I offer spare plants to anyone planting up public areas. In this hot weather, I use 200 litres a week of stored rainwater. I have run out of space and need more land to propagate bedding plants. I have the funds to replace the greenhouses at Spring Lane Nursery, and the occasional winter floods would not be a problem. Unfortunately, Colchester in Bloom has become inactive and declined to register as a charity. I set up my charitable company, Lexton Sanctuary, and I'm applying for registration at the Charity Commission. I would be willing to lease or buy Spring Lane Nursery using the shared concrete forecourt for access. Mr. Hamilton then goes on to provide quite a long Facebook address, which will ensure is published with the minutes. The advantage of volunteer grown bedding plants is that it saves public funds used for expensive commercially grown plants. Also, a reserve could be kept to replace those lost to theft or vandalism. And that's the end of Mr. Hamilton's submission.
Thank you, Pam. That was helpful and very clear. I go to Councillor Lilly because this involves communities and his portfolio.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It also involves Councillor Goss as well, and Councillor King. We've all been involved in this, Mr. Hamilton. Indeed, we set up a meeting with him last year to meet up with officers on the site. But unfortunately, we don't think it's a site that is adequate for Mr. Hamilton's plans to go ahead. There's a lot of problems with the site in the first place. It has a tendency to waterlog and to flood all the time, quite badly as well. But just recently, the woodland projects have started storing all their trees and items on there, and also there's quite a few active beehives and such on there. So it's fairly well active, and the front of the access site is also used for a turn and circle as well. So that's not really adequate enough for Mr. Hamilton's needs. We thought it would be, and we would love to accommodate him to take over the site, but unfortunately, we cannot do it at this moment in time. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly, and thank you to Councillor King, Councillor Goss of their involvement. Thank you for appraising us of that. Councillor Lilly, it sounds as if you've looked into it as best as possible, and I'm sure if you felt that in the future things would change, then I'm sure you'll be in touch with Andy Hamilton. He knows our address, and we know, thanks to him, where he's based. I will move on to the next speaker. Councillor Oxford, hopefully you have been able to get in. We asked the IT support to help you, and I hope you're here. Can I just check, Councillor Oxford, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Good evening.
Yep. Good
So
evening.
would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you. My question's relating to the refuge service. Our crews suffer illness and injuries, and I feel a significant contributory factor is the fact that the majority of wards and routes within those wards are black sack collections, and they are required to service 1,600 properties, whereas the wheel bin routes only service 1,200. The black sack routes often don't get completed. This is because they're expected to do too much work each day. The solution is to reduce every route to 1,200 for all black sack routes as well as the wheel bin routes. I feel this would reduce the sickness levels and ensure that all routes are completed every day. In addition, they will be able to collect unrestricted recycling levels, which obviously would be very good for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Councillor Goss, please. This is your portfolio.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the well-being of staff is a key priority, evidenced by our proactive approach to adapting our operating model, the first in the region to do this as part of the COVID response. Protecting staff was at the centre of this. Recycling is usually unlimited anyway, but a restriction was brought in when services were altered due to the height of COVID. And I seem to recall that Councillor Oxford did actually ask for all limits to be lifted, which would have had a huge impact on the service because we wouldn't have had the staff or capacity to actually deliver that. So prior to COVID, we already had a new strategic priority project to review our waste and recycling strategy, along with systems utilised for collecting waste and recycling. The key drivers for this piece of work are improving performance of the service, creating a better experience for residents, promoting sustainable methods of recycling, and importantly, employee health and well-being. This hasn't changed and remains a priority piece of work. All staff are provided with adequate training, including manual handling training, and performance in relation to the completion of routes has been good and improved since summer 2019. So I'll have to respectfully disagree with Gerard to say that often routes are not complete, because that isn't actually the case. There are occasions when hot weather, like last summer, and other issues affect performance, but generally on the whole, they are performing, and routes are recalibrated, particularly when new houses are added. And of course, we spent £4 million buying a new fleet in 2 tranches in the last 12 months. All operations are risk assessed to mitigate the risk of harm to crews. However, there is evidence to suggest that sickness, absence, and muscle injury are more common with bagged waste collections. This is not necessarily just about volumes handled, but the process of repeatedly bending and lifting heavy items. So part of this work will be to explore all options available for better delivery of the service. Due to the nature of the operation and additional time it takes to lift a bin via the vehicle, wheeled bin collections take longer to complete, hence the routes tend to consist of slightly less properties. However, all crews operate in collaborative groups for each waste type. Some routes tend to be heavier than others each day, so the earlier finishing crews then go and help other crews out, so everybody handles a similar load during the day and all crews finish together. The same will be said for garden waste, because there are 12,500 properties in Colchester with wheelie bins, and that is for black sack and for garden waste. Everyone else is, of course, on the more labour-intensive black sacks and white hessium sacks for garden waste. Now, obviously, lifting tons of garden waste and black sacks absolutely is more energising for staff, and therefore that's why sometimes they suffer more injuries. If everywhere in Colchester, other than the 6,000 properties that can take black sacks from wheelie bins, potentially that would see a lowering of the staff sickness, because obviously people would let the machines do the work as opposed to staff having to physically lift so many tons of weight. And to give you an example, an average crew can probably end up picking up around about 10 to 12 tons of waste on an average trip of black sack if they're doing the manual route.
Thank you, Councillor Goss, and I think it's right to pay tribute at this time to the frontline services that we have had picking up the waste in particular during this time, and they have done an excellent job. So we have thanked them before, and we will thank them again. Councillor Oxford, you do have 1 more minute to respond.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, right. Thank you very much for that response, Councillor Goss. Our experience within Highwoods is that many times we've had places that haven't been collected and we've had to arrange collections the following day. We've been inundated with residents contacting us via social media, emails and other methods. The concern we have here is that a lot of illnesses and sickness are blamed on the increase, are blamed on black sack collections, but the black sack crews do a third more work every day than the recycling, than the wheel bin routes. Therefore, they are doing disproportionately more work. So therefore, that is likely to, if they were only to collect 1,200 a day instead of 1,600, it's likely to reduce sickness levels and muscular injuries even more. And then they would get completed on the same day. And also, against what Councillor Goss said, the garden waste collections have always been restricted, and they would be able to be collected unrestricted like everything else. Thank you.
Councillor Goss, you may just want to respond further.
I'll have to politely disagree with some of the comments. Obviously, we can go back and check on miscollections. In the last year, it's all recorded, so we can statistically see any specific routes which may or may not have been missed, and I'm happy to do that, so it's factual. And yes, garden waste is restricted to 4 bags or 1 wheelie bin. That has always been the case, but again, I don't agree that all of a sudden you can suddenly unrestrict it, because the vehicles, obviously, particularly in the summer, have a capacity, and of course, the more times you fill it, the more trips they have to take out to go and eat and then come back, which obviously takes time getting across town. So hence why it's calibrated in that way. But happy to take it offline with Councillor Oxford and obviously debate the finer detail of the facts if required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goss, and thank you, Councillor Oxford. I will move on to the next speaker, which is Councillor Tim Young, who I know is on the call. Tim, can we hear you?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, hope you can.
Yeah, we can. Over to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise the concerns that have come about today with the news that the Colchester Institute are having to relinquish their lease on the Minories. Obviously, it's a highly regarded, with a lot of affection by people in Colchester. Wonderful memories of the garden, the folly, the tea room, as well as the gallery. And, you know, brief history. Built in the Tudor period, one of Colchester's most historic buildings, bought by the Boggis family in 1731. They owned it for about 200 years. Several tenants since then until 1915, when Geoffrey Ben Susan Butt bought the property with his wife, Ruth, who became one of the first female GPs in Colchester. There's a blue plaque on the building to show that, and breaking down that glass ceiling for women. which is very important. And so it has great history. Ruth was the sister-in-law of the artist Lucian Pissarro. And in 1956, she sold it to the Victor Batley Trust with the strict condition that it must be used for artistic purposes. And since 2008, I think First Sight had it for a while, 2008, Colchester Institute had the lease and have done a very good job, in my opinion. But of course, circumstances being as they are, and with funding for further education being as it is, they've had to make the very difficult decision to give up the lease. So what I'm sure we all want the Minories to continue to stay open. It is a venue that has, as I say, some wonderful memories and is held in great affection by people in the borough of Colchester. And I just wanted to make sure that we need some clarity around the communication from the council, that they will do everything they can to make sure the Minories stays open and works with the Victor Batley Trust to facilitate that to happen with good communication. Ben Cood Adams, who's one of the directors of the Victor Batley Trust, has been in touch with me today. And I think they're confident that they can come to an arrangement to continue the lease, and is asking all those who've shown an interest today on social media and other platforms that if they want to get involved, they can. So I've offered my services. People like Iona Hodgson, Wendy Bailey, Dorian Kelly have also joined in, and just wanted to make sure that the Cabinet is fully behind the Victor Batley Trust and others in supporting the Minories continuing to stay open and for the enjoyment and cultural activities for future generations of residents of the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Tim Young. Councillor Julie Young, please, as portfolio holder, would you be able to respond for us on this occasion?
Yes, of course, Leader. Like many Colcestrians, the Minories holds a special place in my heart. It provides an oasis in the town centre, a quiet refuge to rest and refresh, as Councillor Tim Young has said. As he rightly said, it was the home of our first female GP, a woman ahead of her time who recognised the value of nursery provision, opening up her family home to support families, which acted as a model for future generations. I make this commitment to Councillor Young. I've already been in touch with the Batley Lay Foundation and are waiting for them to get back to me. I've asked for an urgent officer meeting to discuss what we can do to assist. I know Colby have been in touch to offer their services. I have meetings in my diary with partners to discuss how we can see this gem be protected and sustained in the future. The house sits in a strategically important place in our town, and for all of the reasons I've outlined, should be cherished, valued and protected for the enjoyment of future generations. I hope to work with the Colchester Creative Partnership and also with other partners like First Sight to protect this valuable assets for future generations, as I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Back to you, Tim. You have 1 more minute. Hopefully that reassures you.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I think there'll be a number of councillors who want to be involved as well, not just Cabinet members, in helping to make sure that this stays open. I think when we get back to normal, the arts and culture in Colchester has to be invested in. It can help us with the recovery economically. I hope you all appreciate that. We talk about businesses. Well, a lot of these organisations are businesses. They provide employment, and it's what Colchester excels at, of course. Arts and culture, creative industries. Colchester is really at the leading edge, and we are the cultural capital of Essex. So yes, I'm encouraged, but I hope this will be broadly supported and that the net will be spread wide so that all of us who want to help will be able to do so.
Thank you, Tim. Before I just go back to Julie, I'll just say that I was on a call today with the One Colchester Partnership, and the arts and cultural bodies have been involved in that during the crisis. They've been really supportive, really helpful to our residents and to us as an organisation and to the partnership to ensure vulnerable people have been supported and all families, all people have been supported, because arts and culture can support people, especially with all of our mental health during this time. And it was recognised today, of course, that going through recovery again, the arts and culture organisations are there to support us, and we want to support them. Julie, do you want to add some more there?
I don't want to take up too much further time, Leader. Yes, I agree that our arts and cultural organisations play a part, an important part in actually helping with people's mental health, and they've gone above and beyond. They've helped with us. They've done different roles to support us with our communications, I know, and I'm sure they'll play a valuable part in our recovery process, and I want to refer to them later on in the items for discussion. It's early days around the Minories. I know there has been a great clamour from the public, and I've had some communications from ward councillors, and of course they will naturally be involved in the communications that go forward.
Thank you, Julie. I hope that that helps. So moving on to Councillor Gocher. He's not on the call this evening, so I will invite Richard, if you are able to, please, Richard, to read out the questions and comments from Councillor Gocher, please.
Thank you, Chairman. These are Councillor Gocher's submissions. I have 3 questions to raise tonight. Firstly, could you provide the viewing public with a full explanation as to why an application has not been made for the government scheme to move to all electric buses in one town, given that Colchester Borough Council and Essex County Council have been working together on this? Secondly, what are you proposing to do about the high levels of air pollution in Brook Street, East Hill, Mercy Road and other areas post-COVID-19? What plans are in place for the new normal to encourage cycling, walking and less car use, and to ensure there is not a turn to toxic air in congested streets? Thirdly, regarding item 9.2, could you please refrain from negotiating to lift the covenant on the former bus station land? Given that Colchester Borough Council opposed the Alumno development at the inquiry, to then negotiate to get the covenant lifted would be an absurd paradox and frankly bizarre. It would create the impression of two-faced manoeuvring. And that's the conclusion of his comments.
Thank you, Richard. In terms of the last comment, Councillor King will definitely cover that in the paper later. And David, I'll ask if you do want to come in shortly. But on the first 2 items, I'll go to Councillor Martin Goss shortly. I know, and I praise that Councillor Goss was one of the first, absolutely out of the traps, to get to the County Council on the electric bus scheme, to put in our bid first. We were the first council in Essex to say, we want to be part of this electric bus scheme. We would love to be involved. Since then, we've found out more and been working with the County Council. So I'll let Councillor Goss explain that. And the second item as well, please, Councillor Goss.
Thank you. So Mark has contacted me previously, and therefore I will give the same answer that I gave to Mark in writing, so I think it's only fair. So the issue that we've got is that Councillor Kevin Bentley. Councillor Kevin Bentley is obviously in charge of infrastructure highways Essex, and we have a really good relationship with Kevin, and we're working together for the good of Colchester and the good of Essex. And Kevin was delighted to be asked the question that Colchester has ambitions to have the first electric bus. Chelmsford also did the same, but I burned it, so I'm quite pleased. I literally texted Kevin and emailed him, and he did respond. So from an Essex point of view, Chelmsford and Colchester were the front runners to apply, along obviously with all the other councils and towns in the UK. Unfortunately, when you look into the detail, the devil is in the actual detail, and the issue is the scheme. The Department for Transport, in effect, want a whole bus fleet replaced as opposed to a single bus. So when the scheme came out, it sounded as though you could apply for a single electric bus or a couple of electric buses. in addition to the existing fleet that commercial operators have. Therefore, they expect the bus operator to fund part of the replacement cost of the fleet, and buses cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. So if you're replacing a fleet of 50 or 100 buses, it's a significant amount of cost. So at this moment in time, it doesn't fit with the current model that we've got either in Chelmsford or Colchester, and therefore, of course, the bus operators wouldn't want to replace their entire fleet. In addition to that, there is, of course, the infrastructure that you need for all the charging points around the area of significance to ensure that an entire bus fleet could, of course, be kept mobile all day en route. So this has been fed back to the DFT. It's probably likely that something like a small market town would be ideal for this, because that appears to be the way the DFT have set the scheme up, because there'd be less buses and, of course, much less capital funding required from a smaller town. So that is the reason that, unfortunately, at this stage, it hasn't gone forwards. We will, of course, apply in future should it become a different scheme which would fit Colchester and obviously get the relevant commercial bus operators on side. But Mark is aware of that, and he's had that in writing, and I've just added a bit more complexion to it. More widely, to Mark's other point about air pollution, yes, Brook Street is indeed, we think, probably the most polluted street still in Colchester, and that in part, we are told by Essex, is due to extra traffic coming from Ipswich Road. Some agree, some disagree, but we do, of course, have diffusion tubes around Colchester, which we monitor the air quality, and the vast majority of air monitoring shows that we are well below the 40 milligrams per thousand, which is the dangerous level. And in fact, last year, actually in the hot weather, the pollution actually went down. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it is this summer when we do the year-on-year comparisons. But we are working with Essex County Council, and there will be news forthcoming on changes from government funding around cycling and walking, which you'll have seen in other towns. And there will be work going on in Essex to deliver various changes, and Essex will be certainly communicating that in the coming days and weeks on the back of the government funding that has been awarded across various councils, including Essex.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. And just to reassure Councillor Gocher as well, and I think most councillors will know, I sent a letter early on to Kevin Bentley, because he is, as you say, the portfolio holder at the County Council responsible for highways and infrastructure. Essex County Council do that work, they have that responsibility. We are ambitious, we want to be the leading borough within the county on sustainable transport, and we have been urgent and pressing in our calls for that. So thank you, Martin, for your work on that, and we want to keep pushing further. So as you say, there's news to come, but I'm sure many of us will want to go further with ensuring sustainable transport is available to all and is safe for everybody to use, to encourage people to be healthy and active, and to reduce the effects upon our environment of pollution. Okay, thank you. In terms of the last item about alumni, Councillor King, would you be happy to bring that up and to address that under item 9.2i?
Happy to do that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor King. We'll do that later. Therefore, that concludes, I believe, the submissions of the public and councillors. Is that correct, Richard?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, which is decisions referred by the scrutiny panel, of which we have none. Is that correct, Richard?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 7, the appointment of deputy chair of this panel, the deputy chair of the cabinet, and I nominate Councillor Julie Young as deputy chair and as deputy leader of the council. Could I have a seconder, please? See some hands going physically up. Let me just check. I have Councillor Fox and Councillor King, and I saw a physical hand with Councillor Martin Goss. So we definitely have enough seconders. So can we move to the vote? I don't think there's any other nominations that I've seen. I think everyone is happy. I see raised hands. Are those all positives? Okay, there's no other nominations. Right, I will have to move to a physical vote though. So the monitoring officer, then please, can we vote on the nomination for Councillor Julie Young to be Deputy Chair and Deputy Leader of the Council, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Fox?
For.
Councillor Goss?
4.
Councillor Higgins?
4.
Councillor King?
4.
Councillor Lilly?
4.
Councillor Luxford Vaughan?
4.
Councillor Young?
4.
And Councillor Corey?
4.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Excellent. Congratulations, Councillor Julie Young. You are now Deputy Chair and Deputy Leader of the Council for this municipal year, for this period. Would you like to speak?
Just to say thank you very much for your votes and for having continued confidence in me in the role. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Julie. We will move on to the first substantial item of the evening, which is item 8(1)(i), which is the Council's response to the coronavirus. I will just introduce this report and then ask for Adrian Pritchard, our Chief Executive Officer, to give a more detailed response on this one. So this paper outlines the way in which we've been working during the crisis. Now, at our last real meeting, we were coming into the crisis and we made sure we had announcements that reassured the public about where we were at the time. Of course, we are now weeks on and we have been through the worst of the virus. Some of us have concerns about the way in which it's being handled and whether or not we are through the worst, but I hope so. What I would say is this council, Colchester Borough Council, has responded really well. And I would like to thank at this point the officers on the front line who have been delivering our services, but across the organisation who have reassured the public, who have supported the public and who have supported the vulnerable people in our borough. And also the coordination efforts that this council has taken to support people by bringing together partnership working, by bringing together organisations from the borough, for example, Community 360, the Health Alliance, the police, the food bank, and many others who have worked together as a team. And because of the partnership working, thanks to many of our key officers that has been developed over the years, we were ready and resilient and have been able to hold back the worst of the virus and to support people in a really proactive way. So I want to say thank you to officers, thank you to those partners who we've worked with. I feel that we have assured the public that they are safe in the actions that we have taken. And in the paper, it outlines the 4 cells that we have focused on, which are community, business, housing, and organisation. We've also had a recovery cell that has been working in the background that is, of course, much more to the fore now, and we'll talk about recovery and some of the early steps later in the agenda. So I would like to say that working with the communities, we have seen a fantastic public response as well. And I want to say that I think the residents of Colchester have done themselves proud, whether supporting and volunteering to help some of the Community 360 work across the whole town, whether supporting the food bank, or whether just volunteering in your own street and with your own community. That has been fantastic, and we have not seen too many breakings of the rules. Working with the police, we do get updates of particular incidents, but actually on the whole, it has been good. So thank you to our residents for taking a full part, joining us to work to keep our communities safe. I've had very positive responses about our website, which have offered support to businesses and to the community to update them every single day with new updates from the government and how we respond as an organisation to provide services and to provide support, especially in business. And I want to thank the business teams who have got almost £30 million of relief out to businesses, and also our scheme to support Colby to give £10,000 to them to provide a service supporting businesses to help them one-to-one. That has been very positive. And I want to thank councillors as well, those around the table this evening, the portfolio holders who have managed their areas of the service really well, but also to all councillors who have been community champions. And we have communicated with councillors. The comments from the scrutiny panel the other night is we've really kept councillors updated. We've really made sure they've been part of the solution. And they thanked the council, and they thanked officers and the cabinet for the work that's been done and the leadership that's been shown at this time. What I would say is that I was proud to work together with other leaders to bring in cross-party leaders around the table to be there at decision-making points. So key decisions have been made during this period. Most of them have had buy-in from all political groups, and all political groups have been briefed on key decisions. Some decisions have been taken under the emergency powers, which I have had to take with advice from officers and my cabinet, but also with the involvement of the scrutiny chair. Each of those decisions have gone through successfully and have panned out successfully. So I thank all those councillors for the cross-party working that has meant that Colchester has been resilient in its response. And also one positive that came out of it was to contribute to the food bank, £100 each from our locality budgets. So when we do work together, it is much better for the residents of Colchester. So I'm proud of the work that has been done by our staff and our councillors from my point of view as leader of the council. And I'll move now to the more detailed report by the Chief Executive Officer, Adrian Pritchard.
Chair, thank you very much. I would like to spend just a few minutes taking you through the report, if that's all right. Firstly, can I say that we know that following the lockdown of the country on the 23rd of March, life as we know it changed. As the report says, lots of lives have been lost due to COVID-19, and it has also had a profound effect on our communities, on our businesses, on our families and individuals. Our response to the COVID crisis was to implement the directions being given by government, closing our public buildings on the 19th of March, moving our office-based staff to working from home, and with lockdown being announced on the 23rd of March, we closed down those services that we had to. Services such as sport and leisure, events, closing outdoor play and gym areas, for example. And then we concentrated on delivering our key services together with leading the delivery of new services to the public and implementing support measures announced by government. We planned and delivered, as you said, this response through 4 cells. One was organisation, led by Dan Gascoigne, the Chief Operating Officer. The second cell was the community cell, led by Pam Donnelly, Strategic Director. The business cell, led by Ian Vipond, again, Strategic Director at the Borough Council. And then the final one was the housing cell, led by Gareth Mitchell, Chief Executive of Colchester Borough Homes. Each cell was supported by our Assistant Directors and our General Managers. The organisation cell, if I can turn to that one first, the organisation section of the report from page 28 of your papers identifies what the cell was there to do. It was to continue to provide and deliver essential services to the borough and the residents, including waste services, neighbourhood teams, operation of the cemetery and crematorium, and our helpline services, to name just a few. We also needed to continue with business as usual, actually, in terms of, for example, closing our 2019-20 accounts, procurement of contracts, in addition to things like information technology, where our IT services were in high demand to maintain and enhance our capability due to the new remote ways of working. And then our human resource staff seeking to redeploy staff from closed service areas to essential ones. All of this and more had to be achieved by working practices that minimised the spread of the virus and implementing wherever possible the 2-metre social distancing rules. If I can move to the community cell, Chair. The community cell was our response, our community response to supporting our most vulnerable customers and residents. The partnership response, which you've already referred to, was with Community 360 and the voluntary sector, who became integral to the shielding work undertaken. The health and care relationships forged a joint approach to managing the most vulnerable community needs. Many other public and voluntary agencies also came together under the umbrella of One Colchester, a partnership which works seamlessly in the community response to COVID-19 across the borough. This One Colchester partnership and Community 360 provided the bulk of the support given to vulnerable residents with advice, welfare calls to check on people's wellness and to combat isolation, through to the more tangible support of delivering food parcels and regular medication packages. You can see a list of just some of the support provided through this cell of work on pages 29 and 30 of your papers. Perhaps here, Chair, I could pay tribute to the leadership provided to the communities of Colchester by the One Colchester Partnership, and to the countless volunteers who delivered these things to those who were and still are shielding, and to those in our communities who have needed that extra bit of support. Can I turn to the business cell, Chair? We know that so many of our businesses, large and small, have been severely impacted by the lockdown measures and the social distancing guidelines. The business cell itself provided much needed guidance and support through our website, as you have already mentioned, for businesses to know where and how they access the various government provided support measures. The business rates team have not only provided support and relief in certain business rate demands, but also, as you've said, implemented the government's business grant scheme, getting money into the bank accounts of eligible businesses within days of the scheme being announced. In fact, over £30 million of grant to over 2,300 businesses. In addition, they are currently implementing a new discretionary business grant scheme for micro and small businesses to award even more grant funding to even more businesses in Colchester. We've also worked with and financially supported the Colchester Business Enterprise Agency, Colbia, to help advise local Colchester businesses on their future, and a significant number of individuals who actually want help considering starting up their own businesses as we come out of this crisis, which I think is one of the positives, Chair. And perhaps finally, in the business cell work, we have worked closely with the Colchester BID, our Colchester, to support businesses and retail in the BID area, and to plan for the phased reopening of the town centre, together with other high streets and shopping areas across the borough, recognising the need again for social distancing measures. And finally, Chair, the housing cell. The final cell created was to respond to the COVID crisis, was that of housing, led by Gareth Mitchell. One of their major and urgent tasks was to implement the request from government that all known rough sleepers were to be brought in and provided accommodation. The detail is in your papers of how this was done, but it has taken a major effort to work with a very vulnerable group to bring them in off the streets, keep them from returning to rough sleeping, working with them to keep them safe and to begin addressing the variety of needs which these rough sleepers have. As your papers say, although a few have been symptomatic and have been isolated from others, there has not been an uncontrolled spread of the virus amongst this group of individuals. At one point, there were 39 rough sleepers in accommodation in Colchester. Colchester Borough Homes has also continued to provide services to their tenants and to support them through this period. Page 31 lists some of the services and that support. The welfare calls to every single sheltered tenant on a weekly basis. Welfare calls to the over 70s, again on a weekly basis in our social housing. Welfare and benefit advice. Urgent and emergency repairs to tenants' properties. And of course, their antisocial behaviour work out in communities, of which I'm afraid there have been some during the lockdown period. And of course, much, much more. Chair, during this crisis, I have used the emergency powers of decision making to enable service, financial and organisational decisions to be made on a daily basis as the crisis unfolded. Now we are emerging from the pandemic, or we all hope so. I'm pleased that we are returning to proper governance arrangements and council decision making again. In the report on page 32, we have detailed for you two of the major decisions which were taken using urgency and not emergency provisions in accordance with the scrutiny arrangements. Just turning to Appendix 1 to the report, captures a timeline showing our response to the coronavirus and highlights, for me anyway, the range, the scale and the detail of what the council has been dealing with since the lockdown began. And Appendix 2 is a snapshot of a service status infographic table, which I know you are particularly keen on, Leader, used during the crisis to inform people of the status of some of our services. The table is only illustrative because you will know that we have begun again our collection of garden waste across the borough, for instance. Chair, I would like to finish my presentation of this report by saying that in this unprecedented situation, I have been delighted with the partnership approach to dealing with this crisis from all the statutory agencies involved, Colchester Community 360, and the array of voluntary groups who have played their part magnificently for individuals and to individuals and their many and regular small acts of kindness. And to my own organisation as Chief Executive of the Borough Council, I would like to thank each and every one of my colleagues from the refuse collectors collecting the waste daily, to the IT staff who enabled so many of us to work remotely, the helpline staff who have been out and literally picked up thousands of people who have fallen in their own homes during this period, to the business rates team who have delivered those grants to many businesses so quickly, to our online team who have helped people remotely to use technology to connect with their family and friends, and of course our cemetery staff who have been so respectful to families of bereaved loved ones in these difficult circumstances. Even the small team who put together so quickly but so comprehensively a neighbourhood resource pack. And perhaps to my own senior management team who have done everything I've asked of them and many things that I never even thought of, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to present the Council's response to the COVID crisis report and to pay my own thanks to so many people who have responded in helping our communities to get through this unprecedented and undoubtedly unique period in our lives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. And I think that report really does cover, only briefly, the amount of work that's been done by this organisation, by you and your officers, and the partnerships across Colchester, as I emphasised earlier on. And you mentioned the housing work. I was on a call today with One Colchester, and it was concluding the work over this period that I know Councillor Fox will speak on soon. And it's just fantastic the work that has been done to support the most vulnerable people. And also the work that CBH have done to contact people in such a proactive way. And I'm sure, again, Councillor Fox will talk about the pride in the work that they've done. So thank you, Adrian, and thank you to the officers that are supporting here this evening and those who are working from home at the moment and on the front line who have continued to provide such an excellent response. I will move now to those Cabinet members who have their hands raised to speak. I have Councillor Young and Councillor King and Councillor Fox. So Councillor Young, please, and then Councillor King and Councillor Fox. Julie.
Thank you, Leader. I think this report fully quantifies the role this council has played in responding to this crisis. Frankly, the demands placed upon this authority have been unprecedented. I'm proud of every one of our staff members who stepped up during this time, going above and beyond to maintain crucial services, working with partners to keep our community safe, putting aside individual fears about personal safety. Corporately, we have taken a responsible approach, deploying staff in different roles, but ensuring that each activity has been risk assessed to maintain safety. We are grateful to the cooperation of the Colchester people who have played their part in storing, recycling and acting responsibly, keeping COVID numbers as low as possible. We know that COVID has brought many challenges, many lives lost, and isolation, mental health and anxiety has risen. This authority has strengthened partnerships through One Colchester, which has done so much to support our community. Leader, it is Volunteer Week, and we should celebrate the enormous part played by our volunteers during this crisis. It has been unprecedented. As a Colchester community, our national portfolio organisations have done so much to educate, engage and lift spirits. First Sight produced the art pack, which went nationwide and beyond. The Mercury Theatre Panto reached 60,000 viewers online, for example. Our museum service continues to support home education, providing learning packs, which I know is helping families. We've had poetry from day one from Colchester Art Centres. I will leave others to mention other outstanding work, but especially the work of Colchester Borough Homes, which I think has been outstanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Very well said. I support everything that you've just put forward there. Thank you. Councillor King and then Councillor Fox. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, it's all been well said by others. On business, just 3 brief points. The focus on intelligence and engagements proved right. I can see the effects of that. There's much more to be done, but a fantastic start swiftly made. That led to focusing on what support we could provide and swiftly. And the widening of our extensive partnerships and networks is something I really sort of do applaud. Again, it's been mentioned by others, as has money, and money really matters. And the pace at which it's been passed through to business with a sensibly permissive approach to often complex rules. I want to applaud that also. And I want to just sort of say 2 last things. First of all, that the difference between the work that our officers do, my apologies, Chair, and not, is the difference between a business folding or being successful. And in the strokes of the bell, as time is now going to call, I'll pass to Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Councillor King. It chimes for you, Councillor Fox.
Thank you very much, Leader. It's always good to hear the chimes from Councillor King's home. I wonder if he lives in Big Ben sometimes, the number of times it goes off. But I just wanted to focus on some of the work around housing. So rightly, so many of our NHS workers and key workers and carers have got the plaudits, and we have applauded them all ourselves on Thursday nights. But I think what's also key is that we recognise the work of council key workers in that as well. So I'd like to thank the board of CBH and to Gareth Mitchell and his team for all the work that they've done. From the outset, it was clear that there would be a significant demand placed upon CBH, and in particular around the rough sleeping and homelessness population. It really was a Herculean effort amongst housing officers and staff from both Colchester Borough Council and Colchester Borough Homes to ensure that we moved so many off the streets and accommodated, using both hotel accommodation and the facility that we had at Elfreda House, where there was spare capacity as we look to redevelop that. And as Adrian Pritchard has said, so much more work that was done by CBH staff, contacting and supporting tenants in sheltered housing, and ensuring support for all those most vulnerable who were shielding. In addition to repairs, welfare and benefit advice, antisocial behaviour, emergency repairs and safety checks. And as I was speaking with portfolio holders, other housing portfolio holders from across Essex over the last few weeks and from beyond across the country, I was struck by just how well prepared and how fantastic the response was from Colchester Borough Homes. And I think that is testament to the unique relationship that we have with them. And so I'd like to once again extend my thanks and I put on record our thanks as a cabinet for the hard work that they have done.
Thank you, Adam. I was just writing down a few more points for me to add, and that was about national calls, and I'll come back to that. I think the reflection of our council compared to many others in terms of the efforts and the proactive work we went to is really testament that we have been leading in many cases amongst districts in this country. So please raise your hand when you are complete. I have Mike Lilly, Councillor Lilly, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. as the portfolio holder for communities, it was fantastic to see so many organisations around doing their part. It just goes to show how Colchester has performed well above and beyond anybody else. And I was in a meeting yesterday with community wellbeing portfolio holders and officers around Essex, and listened to them and how where we are compared to all the other authorities. Our officers did a fantastic job all across the board for everybody. Those citizens' advice, Community 360, Age Concern, all of them were working really hard to help people. It was fantastic to see. And I'd like to thank every one of those and our officers as well. And also the fact that the police, they had probably one of the hardest jobs of all to enforce some very, very unclear guidelines given to them by the government. But they did it with a really good job. And I think they did it in such a way that they advised people. They were out patrolling all over the place. And praise to the Colchester Police Station and to our zone wardens as well. They were out there on the front line and they were also doing their part. And I'd like to thank all those officers involved in that as well. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, the police have been involved in our partnership working all of the way along. And I want to thank them in particular. As you say, it's been difficult for them to get that fine balance in supporting our communities as well as enforcing where needed. The word partnership has been used a lot, and it can be seen as sort of language that politicians use or officers use. But what it means is just getting down and rolling up the sleeves and working together. And that has happened more than ever before during this crisis. But it was prepared. It was work that was organised by some of our officers, Community 360, other organisations, for example, the Health CCG. And I just want to say that hopefully should continue after COVID. And Colchester is well placed. And I want to reassure residents out there that we are going to come out of this stronger. And I hope in a way that is better for all of our lives, healthier in senses of physical, mental, but also environmentally and sustainably as well. We do have to pick up the Scrutiny panel's report and how they scrutinised this report the other day. Councillor King, your hand is raised. Was that still raised from before, or did you want to add more?
I just wanted to round off a remark I was trying to make before time struck, and it fits with your own comments and the Chief Executive's earlier about partnerships and their value. And you get a third-party view of performance from other people in a way that perhaps sometimes we might not see. And so to be at a Business Improvement District Board meeting today and to hear the acknowledgement and praise, which is a fairly rare thing, for the work of the council and for the can-do attitudes of the many officers who in their different ways have been connected to that work, getting ready for reopening, which is your point about a confident future. Without that, there's no question, and I was given examples elsewhere of other business improvement districts across the country who in the view of some of the independents who look at a number of these different arrangements, we are better placed. And that's a compliment, not just to the way the bid is nowadays working, but it's a compliment to our officers. So we can really thank them not only for what they've done to get us to this point, but for the fact that it has real consequences for the way the town will open up and the way in which business we might hope will come back with all the positives that means for income, our local economy, and frankly, perhaps more important than many things, the jobs of people who work in and around the town. So I'd just like to round it out with that third party view. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you for your work with the business sector. Sam Good of the BID and also Simon Blacksall as chair have played their roles in the partnership working as well, and I hope that's going to have longevity going forward when we recover from this crisis. So we move to the scrutiny panel items, and they've wanted to update a couple of points in the report. I would say some of these are more about scrutiny and improving the report. I would say the report was so comprehensive with the appendix of every decision and every action taken day by day is something that not many other councils will do. But we're open and we're transparent and we want to learn if we need to. But we also want to celebrate the good work that's been done. And the scrutiny panel, it may not show in the minutes, really did celebrate the work that this council had done. So Councillor King talks about third parties. I will talk also about those members the other night who on the scrutiny call really gave some positive experiences from their communities with their residents and the public, but also of the council and how we responded. Can I move to Andrew Weavers, please, to just update us on the additions made by the scrutiny panel?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So the scrutiny panel on the 1st of June pre-scrutinised this report and they made 3 recommendations to Cabinet. Those 3 recommendations are set out in the supplementary agenda for your meeting, but I'll read them out for you. Paragraph A, a full decision log be published showing all decisions taken under emergency powers and detailing who took them and why they were necessary. B, a sentence be added to paragraph 5.10 of this report to clarify that recycling collections had been suspended for a period and giving the dates between which collections were suspended. And finally, paragraph C, details of the Council's emergency powers provisions be appended to this report. You will need to decide, Chair, whether or not you accept these recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. As I say, there was many positives in there, but they were just saying about the explanation on the waste. They asked me, and I think Councillor Goss at the time, if that just for a full explanation, which they absolutely supported, and group leaders supported at the time about protecting staff and protecting residents, not spreading the virus with the collections. But also those other comments, I think they found the report so in depth, they wanted to have more. So I think the Chief Executive explained how in depth it was, but if possible, we could add the 2 or 3 decisions that were taken under urgency powers to that as a matter of detail. The emergency powers also definition to be added at the bottom of the report. Are we happy to note those and to agree them? So I'll move to a vote just to see if everyone is happy. We'll have to do that verbally. So Andrew, could you go through that as a vote, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan? 4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So we'll accept that report with the additions from the scrutiny panel. Thank you all. And we can move on to the next item. Thank you for your contributions. We'll just check the time. I think if we can go through the next item, then look at comfort break after that. I hope that's reasonable. So the next item, 8.2 little i's, the budget changes and budget strategy for 2021. And this is in response to the coronavirus crisis and how we are ensuring our budget will be on track for this coming year. I invite Councillor Dundas first to address Cabinet as a visiting speaker, as a councillor. Councillor Dundas, I know you're on the call. Can we check we can hear you, please?
Thank you. Yes, testing 1, 2, 3.
Good evening. Over to you, Paul.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Councillor Corey. You'll be pleased to hear I'm going to be very brief on this item. We had a very good discussion at Scrutiny on Monday. We got into some detail about this, and I really don't think there's any need to repeat it. The only thing I will repeat for the benefit of those who weren't there is I think there was unanimous thanks and praise for the work of all the officers. You highlighted in the last agenda item that we'd rapidly moved to everybody working from home in a completely different working circumstances. So for the finance team to be able to pick up the pieces and put this together is a tribute to them, and I think they deserve our praise for doing so. And also to Councillor King, who I know has put a lot of hours in on this. I'm sure going forward, we will have many more discussions. We have some good discussions about the details. I know you are all well aware of the challenges you face. As I said on Monday, the assumptions that we used various analogies, fingers in the air, nailing Jenny to the wall and everything. The assumptions will not come out exactly as stated. We know that, I appreciate that, and nobody's going to criticise anybody for that. Obviously, we hope that the reality turns out to be better than the forecast, but we shall see. I will just mention briefly the changes which Scrutiny suggested, and I know they were accepted, they were voted for by Scrutiny, so I won't go into a lot of details, but I think as I proposed them, I should just explain them very, very briefly. It really centred around paragraph 2.5 and the NEGC payment. I think there was a feeling that, as worded, the sentence could be, particularly by those who weren't familiar with the situation, be misinterpreted. That it may be interpreted that it was of bottom line financial benefit to the council to release the money, where it refers to reclaiming costs. Obviously, we know that that's not quite the case. The analogy we use, that if somebody owes you £10, if you then give them £12 and they give you £10 back, you're not actually better off. So that was really, really what we discussed. I obviously am aware that there are other issues. There are shareholder agreements, duties to cooperate, and whatever. And we do recognise that that may be a factor coming down the line. But looking at simple accounting maths, at this exact moment in time, NEGC owes CBC around £313,000 for services, rent, or whatever you want to call it. And the accounting way to recover that is to issue an invoice. So we suggested simplifying that sentence, really not changing it significantly, but just taking off the last bit and making it very simple for anybody reading it to understand. Because I do think we have to be clear in our decisions, both to Cabinet, to councillors, and of course to the public, as to what we're actually deciding and what we're actually doing. The reasons for changes to paragraph 12.3 are the same. They bring the two into line and they make the whole thing work as a very concise, accurate statement. I mean, as far as the actual recommendation is concerned to take this to full council, at this moment, that's obviously a political decision for you, the Cabinet. I personally would caution whether it's really the best point in time and perhaps the best way of doing it, thinking back to what's happened in the past. I know imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and I'm sure Theresa May will be very flattered that the council administration is using her tactics to get difficult things passed by simply bringing the same thing back time and time again and hoping for the best. But I think this evening you might want to have a serious think about whether you really want to bring this to council in July, and maybe whether you want to postpone it for the time being and maybe look at a different way of doing it and maybe have further discussions with other parties before doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. We are, of course, having conversations with other parties and other partners and want to involve people as much as possible, being open and honest about that particular issue. Councillor King, I will go to you. I do have Councillor Fox indicating to speak as well. So I don't know if you want to address the items explained by Councillor Dundas first. Councillor King, I can go to Councillor Fox and then come back to you for the main report.
I think so, Chair. That probably be best. I thank, obviously, our esteemed colleague, Councillor Paul Dundas, for the generosity of his remarks. As he has shown, you always have to wait to the end of the sentences to see what might lie at the bottom of the soup, but nonetheless do appreciate it, because I know it's sincere, and it's good to see that the work of the wider team and the context for it is understood. On NEGC, I made it plain at Scrutiny that I personally was comfortable with the changes because I agreed that they were minor, but they kept the focus on the point that Councillor Dundas made in that discussion, and which if he will bear with me, I will play back to him, which is that the essence of the recommendation is that we are a partner. It's a point I've made many times before. We have an obligation to our fellow local authorities. These are bills that have been incurred. He is an accountant, and no doubt an esteemed one. He will know this better than many. So we have to pay our bills as a good partner. That's how we should work with any that we deal with. And his refinement of language was to make that plain, that this was about partnership working and our responsibility to each other. That's why I'm comfortable. In terms of the timing, I accept that there's always a view that later is better, but I'm not sure that that's going to help. We last time did not agree to the payment in full council because we didn't debate and understand what many didn't know, which is that we are a stakeholder with obligations. But there was a sense, and I understood it at the time, that we at that time lacked the clarity of the inspector's conclusions. We now have that clarity, and we have at least the beginnings of a way ahead. If Councillor Dundas will accept that we will talk to him and to others after and away from this moment, and on the principle that there will be a transition to something else, that is logical, given that the inspector's letter is not what was in the proposition from before, and that we are, and we can explain this and show this, that we are working to the facts that we have and in a sensible way, then I hope that he will be comfortable, more comfortable, and therefore his own words, that this is about shareholders and honourable dealing with each other, would allow him to support, actively support us making this payment as we should, on the basis that it is a step to something different on which there will be full council discussion and full council agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. There was a really good debate at Scrutiny the other night, and I'd like to thank Councillor Dundas for that. Just a quick question back to him. He's taken a considerable amount of time to think about this and the amendment that he's proposing. And does that mean that then he will be able to support that at full council in paying those costs that are due to NEGC?
I'll come back to that. I can't say that at the moment. What I will say is I'll repeat what I said earlier, that I feel that it is a more accurate statement going to full council as to what the proposal actually is. It is to pay the money, and I felt that it was, as I said, it was open to misunderstanding. But in terms of where we go from here with NEGC and the project, to call it that, I'm always willing to talk, but I think politically, I think it might have to be done in a slightly different way. That's my view, but my door is always open. But let's see what happens also with regards to local plan over the next couple of weeks. We've got a local plan committee, I think, on June the 15th. We'll also perhaps have a little bit more idea when we actually see, hopefully, the modifications which are going to be suggested for tendering. And I would hope, and this is really one of my reasons for saying whether this is a good idea to bring it forward, suggesting on the 3rd of June to bring it to full council on July the 15th, because I think there's going to be quite a lot more information to come in quite short order in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we might have a little bit more idea as a council as to where we're heading.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. So I think it's really important we work together on this, and I will ensure that that happens, and Councillor King and Councillor Young, with responsibility for this, will work with all groups. And we have already had initial discussions about how we move forward. And I think it is really important, if we need to move forward away from an old model, that we deal with that and we move forward with new possibilities. So I do want to ensure all groups can feel briefed, informed, and be able to speak on this at full council and eventually get to a solution and a conclusion that can take us forward. I hope that can be supported. I will move now to Councillor King to actually address the item on the budget about how we move forward post-COVID with our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan had her hand up briefly. That's gone. Okay, if that's all right. Okay.
It is up.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think.
Shall I just, is it on that point?
It was on that point. I'm really happy to let Councillor King present everything before I ask the question, because it may be more relevant at the end, whichever way you want to take it, Chair.
I suppose it depends if it's relevant now to that last discussion.
Well, yeah, it relates to NEGC, but I mean, the first thing I was going to say was I think it's a really comprehensive report, and I'm really grateful to Councillor King and officers for putting it together. It's an alchemy that I do not understand, and I think they've done a fantastic job. But my concern was to do with the NEGC money. In order for consistency, I felt at the time that we decided not to spend that money, it was because the work they were about to do was premature. And I think I could go into detail, but I won't. I still maintain that position. I don't think we've got value for money, even though we haven't paid the bill. And I know that at Scrutiny there was a discussion about the shareholder agreements, which I've not seen copies of, and I suppose my question relates to that, because there's one thing, we have an obligation to pay it, and the other is that I object to paying it because I don't think it represents value for money. So I wonder if that could be addressed by Councillor King. Are we going to be given more details of the shareholder agreement, or do we just have to assume that yes, we have to pay it regardless? And just two other points on that particular issue. Will there be a review of the work that was carried out within that time frame, because it was the public consultation and the evidence at hearing, and I just wonder if the NEGC board directors are going to be reviewing whether that was successful, and what lessons can be learnt from it, and that will inform, obviously, going forward, whether they are the right vehicle to work with the plan as it stands, should it be adopted.
Okay, thank you. Well, some of that I think Councillor King can address, but some of that will be in discussions that we have with all councillors, with local plan representatives, and the two portfolio holders going forward, and Cabinet. So thank you for those. Councillor King, you can address some of those, of course, but then move on to the main report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrea. Let me just briefly touch on them, acknowledge them, and hopefully in a way that Councillor Julie Young would recognise the facts that she also sees. And then I'll return, Chair, at that point to where we were, which was to introduce the report. He's absolutely right to say that value for money should matter to us all, so I understand that point. It's a very difficult thing to judge. The ultimate test would be if we got 3 garden communities through. You might have said, everybody would have said it'd be great, but it would still be a terrible result from perhaps your and many other people's perspective. So it's not an easy thing to assess, but I do understand the point about public money being spent well, and my take is that everybody does. The sums of money are significant. They are, however, as you understand, from a Colchester Borough Council perspective, small relative to the whole because of government support and the way we share the bill out, and tiny relative to both the challenge and the promise if we end up with an approved local plan, and whatever the difficulties it may bring, an approval for a garden community. So there are lots of different ways of looking at this, but I absolutely accept that we should walk through that at the right time and the right place, and that should, as the leader said, taking account of the views of the other parties, which is conditions everything I say, should lead us to judging what's best and what's next. So I do expect lessons learned. I do expect to be an assessment of what went well and less well, But as I say, I put it into context of the relative value of doing this. The most important thing to do is to look at what we have to do next. We have to accept the costs and the charges, even if we're paying, as we are, 1/8 of every public pound that's being invested. And as I say, tiny to the sum of the whole. But I'm sure that there will be a conversation around that. And to your specific, to the shareholder agreement at Scrutiny, I said then that that's not a document well understood. I will ensure that we do circulate it with some kind of hopefully useful commentary to make plain what that requires of us all. But the essence, as I've said, is plain in the word agreement and partnership. We're bound together with each other until we change. And all of us, as the leader has said, would expect there to be a change. Be wrong to speculate on that. Not fair to our officers and others who, whatever you may think of the results, have done huge amounts of work within a very difficult planning framework over many, many months to try and secure a way ahead to a local plan. And good or ill, we're obviously closer to that. But I do hear what you've said, and I will make sure that on the shareholder agreement that we do get something round to you and others, and that I hope that will help with this answer some of your concerns. Chair, if you're content, I'll move to the paper itself. And I thank those who have been generous about it. The credit goes to Paul Cook and his team, as you might expect. I want to give a flavour, as it seems to me and seems to us, because it's really important that we understand, and those who listen and those who do pay an interest in this understand just how grave is the crisis that we are facing at this moment. You know, the word unprecedented has been used in central government, has been used by several tonight. It really is true. This is not just an extraordinary health emergency, the last parallel for which was a century ago. We face a deep recession, if not a depression, and at a pace for which there is no parallel. This paper sets out the analysis. We go to page 2. My huge thanks to the team for this, for all the work, but I can just say, as is illustrated on this page and the next, we've been looking at all of the factors as described in section 5. I wanted the pentagram, this is as close as I could get to it, of financial impacts and new priorities for work and commitments, new investments needed, transformation and reserves, the whole complexity of the organisation, its current commitments and its future intent had been looked at detail, in depth, as described through this paper. If we go to the next page, please. For those who have looked through it, we detail through paragraph section 6 those financial impacts. It would be right for me, Chair, just to say that uncertainty is a huge complication that anybody will understand for estimation. This reset budget and strategy is our best current assessment of the connected challenges for which, as I've said, there is no parallel. We have been robust. We've looked hard at every income source with the service leaders, and we've looked at cost, and we looked at reserves and the scope for transformation. We have been prudent. We've looked at the first views of other councils and at what happened when the financial crash of 2008-9 arrived. And we have modelled different scenarios, and Cabinet have been through those, taking account of early actuals, early experience. These numbers and conclusions in this paper represent our central estimate. We know, or we assume, income will near halve this year and will recover slowly, but not to pre-crisis levels for several years. We will have to work hard together, our teams, our officers, to open facilities when we can, and in a way that gains consumer confidence. We expect debt levels to recover slowly, but not to pre-crisis levels sorry, I beg your pardon, we expect debt levels to rise and calls for support on our services, including financial support for council tax, to rise. All of this will have to be closely monitored and managed with changing calls on COVID support and income loss tracked. We will do so. We have to be really clear about this, largely on our own. Government help and support to the wider economy has been extraordinary, and I've acknowledged that at Scrutiny and elsewhere. This is beyond politics. How they stood up to the challenge economically, I think is praiseworthy. But as set out in paragraph 612 to 618, put the paper up when we can, they have so far met only a slice of our costs. And I wanted just to perhaps go back up to the earlier page, because there is something about the context which I did want to put. These two slides, for those who've looked at it, do set the scale by which we have to judge all of this. Now, for those who've looked up The Great Frost, it's an interesting read. It's not something you want to go and imagine ourselves coping with. We might hope to do better than in the early 1700s, but the scale of economic oscillation is extraordinary. Our approach and our assumptions, Chair, has been the one illustrated in 6.5, which is a later assessment, not the Bank of England one, but OBR and other commentators, which assumes not a bounce back, but a long, tough climb towards a large degree of recovery, but an incomplete process. Thank you very much. As set out in paragraph 7 of the paper, we will have to look, Chair, at how we raise money. We will have to look not just at income and what we can do, we'll have to look at fees, charges, and council tax. Now, for all of us who in this authority before my time, there's no wish to do that. We have not raised council tax more years than we have, but there is no question that for us to minimise the damage and the risk to services, we're going to have to work hard at income recovery. We're going to have to look at how we can raise additional income. And then, as we described in the paper, Chair, we're going to have to go into our reserves. What's proposed is a call on reserves of over 8 million, leaving something like 10 still in the pot. But for those who know, much of that 10 is earmarked or otherwise not accessible. We hold it for other purposes, for needs that we must, and we hold it on behalf of other parties. This deep call, this extraordinary deep call on our reserves is only possible because of our past prudence. Some local authorities are not so well placed, and I genuinely would worry for them. For us, this is a huge, but I still say, I think, a surmountable challenge despite the uncertainties. And what you have, Chair, as a series of recommendations reflects that balance I've tried to describe and the paper does in depth between action on a wide front with deep uncertainties, but a way we can chart through to a balanced budget and a reset budget that will still deliver the heart of our services and give us scope to support recovery. Chair, rather than I give you more of what you and others can read, I'd refer us to the recommendations in paragraph 2, which call for us to agree the use of reserves to cover COVID-19 costs, to agree the use of new homes bonus, to agree the budget strategy, and as touched upon earlier, and a limited advantage in going through it again, to recommend the release of those funds held, that contribution for NEGC, which is our partnering work with our other local authorities in our work for the local plan. I so recommend, subject to your questions or any comments from colleagues.
Thank you, David. And I want to say thank you to you again for marshalling this, and to Paul Cook and to his team, because this has been difficult for us on a human level, but in terms of finances, as local councils, we have gone above and beyond, and that costs, and we've been unable to bring in the income that we now rely on. Because of the government cuts over the years, we no longer get any revenue support grants. So we have had to replace that with commercial income. And you've explained how that now means we are in a black hole of finances. Let's be blunt about it. And the government did say, the minister, I listened to him, Simon Clarke, and I listened to Robert Jenrick as well, say that they would support us through this period. I do hope they keep their promise. I do hope they deliver, because the people of Colchester deserve that. They also deserve prudent management of the finances, and they've got that through you and your team, so thank you. Looking at reserves, looking at fees and charges, looking at council tax, looking at streamlining services and sharing services. That's us pulling every lever we can, and I thank you for doing that, and for stretching and looking at what we can do, thinking creatively. So we are now at a position where we can still prioritise the great things in this borough and the policies that we have with this sort of realigned budget, which has taken a lot of work and a lot of stress. So thank you, David. Are there further comments from other councillors? Just seeing a few hands raised. So I've got Councillor Luxford-Vaughan and Councillor Fox. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan, please.
Just to reiterate what I said earlier, is that I do think it's a very impressive report, and my thanks go to officers and Councillor King for producing it. Just one last note on the NEGC 2.5 bullet point. Thank you, Councillor King, for acknowledging that you're prepared to share the shareholder agreement. What I would say is that I was uncomfortable. I really want to support this paper because I do think it's brilliant, but I would put the very heavy caveat that I reserve the right not to vote for it at full council if I'm not satisfied once I've read that shareholder agreement.
Thank you. Let's hope that we are able to satisfy all councillors on that. Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. And thanks to Councillor King and for officers for the report. I think what's clear in the paper is just the impact that this is going to have on our finances. And I would really like to thank officers for the work that's been going on, because I don't think there are many councils out there who at this stage are providing the level of detail about what will be happening in our community as we go forward. And as you say, it's not just an increase in costs, although I think particularly about the work to support rough sleepers. We were provided with around £7,000 or thereabouts initially to support our work to bring everybody in. That figure doesn't even meet a tenth of the costs we have incurred. There was no specific support forthcoming, and despite the initial indication from government that, as you say, they would back us to the hilt, we didn't receive anything further. The £2 million or so that we have secured has to cover costs across the council, but it also has to, as has been talked about, cover the loss of income as well. Not only in our commercial services delivered through our wholly owned companies, but in services that are dependent on fees, services that might not be the most high profile within the council, but that are fundamental not only to our statutory responsibilities, but that make a real difference to the well-being, safety and health of all our residents. David has said that there are other councils perhaps even more at risk financially, and there is talk in the local government sector about some councils having to issue Section 114 notices. We're not in that position, and I think that's testament to the way that we've managed finances in this council over the last decade or so, and that we do have those reserves to fall back on a rainy day. We took support from the job retention scheme, working with our staff to support those in commercial services and those who couldn't work on the front line due to shielding and isolation. But politics is about choices, and as we move forward, we'll have to make decisions on what we do as a country as well as what we do locally. I hope the lessons of the last 10 years have been learnt. Cutting our way out of a recession is a recipe for increased unemployment, jobs that don't exist, providing security, not providing increase in wages. and seeing the hollowing out of public services. I hope that as we move forward, we'll be able to protect what we can in investing in Colchester, and that is absolutely part of our recovery plan. But the decision is there for central government about whether they are going to change their path, the path that they've chosen for the last 10 years, and support local communities.
Thank you, Councillor Fox, and we can do that at the first instance, but we need support from government. And we have talked as a cabinet about investing in our borough and trying to invest our way out of the crisis. But at the same time, this report says how we are financially very hard up as a result of the crisis. I'll go back to Councillor King. There are no other hands up, so thank you for those contributions. Councillor King, finally to you.
Thank you, Chair. My thanks to comments and contributions from fellow councillors. Just a couple of closing remarks on this, just really to round this off for the dozens who are listening to us. The first point to be said is this budget assumes some acts of bravery by the senior management team and us. We have got to, unless we get a windfall, government does turn up with a redeemed promise to meet our costs and to meet our problems, which, as I've said, I don't think that will be wise to assume. We will have a huge challenge in terms of what we have to deliver in terms of that, quote, transformation. So looking at services with partners, there's going to be opportunities, but there's going to be some difficult decisions in there about how we reshape it and how we take cost out working with others. And we just ought to acknowledge that. It's a bigger challenge than past years. So we have to do it at pace as well. So there's not the usual a year or so to get to it. We're going to have to get to it quick. So there's going to be continued intensity and therefore a need for us on behalf of the council we represent and residents to sort of keep returning as we have been to the financials and how we're going to embed what we've just set out in a way that gives that balanced budget at least impact on the services and where we can with most advantage. I thought it was just right to acknowledge that challenge as well as to express confidence in the quality, and we really do have it, of many of those who are listening, who are part and parcel and will be central to how we make the changes we need to do. So this is revise and review extraordinary. We'll be doing this all the way through the year. And of course, Chair, as you know, we'll be bringing back, I think next month, the next instalment. So we'll be looking at, and the Chief Operating Officer, Dan Gascoigne, is doing work with others on new strategic priorities. That will be an enjoyable job for us all. We've got to look at capital, where there are more freedoms, and of course the HRA, Councillor Fox's leadership. So there are some great things to do, but there is a lot to be done. And the central message is this is cautious and careful. It may be better, but it could be yet worse because we do not control the context in which we're working. But we are set as fair as we can be. And I thank colleagues for the contributions, including where we disagree, Councillor Luxford Vaughan, which is, I believe, we should always pay a bill. And I'll come back to you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King, and I have confidence in your management of it all. So I think we've expressed positive regard for this report, and thank you again for all of our staff who have contributed to this. Now we need to take two decisions. First of all, to vote on the scrutiny recommendations to add to this report, and then to accept the report through with those additions. So Andrew Weavers, could you just correct that for me and just make sure we're absolutely on the right track?
Yep, sure, Chairman. So the recommendations that you've got from Cabinet, there are two. A is paragraph 2.5 of the report be amended to delete the words "to enable the recovery of Colchester Council's costs." The second recommendation, B, is that current paragraph 12.3 of the report be replaced with "release of the contribution will enable the financial position to be put in good order ahead of determining future action." Those are the recommendations, Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's move to the vote.
Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford Vaughan? 4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chairman.
So thank you to the scrutiny panel for their additions, and we agreed them. So to the report itself, Andrew.
Okay, Chair, I will read out the recommendations, and particularly with regard to paragraph 2.5, which you've just amended. So 2.1 is to note the likely impact on 2021. 2.3, to agree the use of 6.692 million of reserves in 2021 to cover COVID-19 costs. 2.3, to agree the use of £0.5 million of new homes bonus in 2021 to cover COVID-19 costs. 2.4, to agree the budget strategy for 21-22 as set out in section 11 of this report. Paragraph 2.5, to recommend to 15th of July 2020 Council the release of the 1920 NEGC contribution of £350,000 as set out in section 12 of this report.
Thank you. With those recommendations, those additions we've already agreed, can we move to the vote, please?
Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford Vaughan?
4.
4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that confirmation, that report. I will now suggest that we have a 5-minute comfort break, just over, and we come back just in time to start a few minutes before 8. So if we come back about 2 minutes to 8, please. Okay, please mute your video as well. Hopefully people are ready to return. So when you are, please return to the screen so I can see you are there and ready to go. We hope that no one can see too much of the dinner or nibbles that we've had in between in those few minutes. It did make me think whilst we're on a break about the announcements about the toilets we usually make, but I don't know where exactly in the house your toilets may be. But hopefully that comfort break has been useful for all and we can get going within a minute. Just waiting for Councillor King to come on.
Here, Chair.
Excellent. The sound of your clock will be going off soon. Okay, so I think we've got everyone we need. Richard, can you just confirm that we're ready to go again, please?
We're ready to go, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all. We have covered the two most substantive items and we've had our say speakers. So we have gone in depth so far. I think we could probably be more swift with the items that follow. And maybe you'll have some of the light of the evening to go when we are completed. So item 8, 3 little I's, the COVID-19 Council response, the recovery paper. And this is the first steps to outline what we have been doing and what we will be doing as we go through recovery after the crisis. Councillor King, if you could give a brief update on this paper, please.
Thank you, Leader. I will keep it brief because it is a continuation of what we started and has been much discussed earlier this evening of the great reactive and responsive work from the council team with the support, obviously, of many beyond the council. And I will just draw out as here the recommendations, but the essence of them, which is that what we have and what we should improve and what we should take forward is a thematic assessment across all of the cells, all the key cells, here we go, of the organisation, and that we aim to deliver those themes in the way that's most helpful, which is by turning them through to plan and programme. Excuse me, Chair.
Ready when your clock has stopped for you to carry on. Recovering the paper.
Was like you couldn't make it up. Do come to mind, Chair. My apologies to you, colleagues. I hope I gave a wry amusement to those who made the decision to listen to us. I was trying to say, Chair, hopefully I did. What we've got here is a comprehensive piece that's the next steps on from the reactive and restoration work on which we talked before. So here we're going into depth. I'll leave it to colleagues who might want to pick up briefly on any particular of their cells, but the principles are plain in this comprehensive capture of what we will do next is a thematic approach, cross-cutting work that will address everything that matters in terms of service delivery and support to the community and support to business. And I will leave it at that, Chair, because it stands on its own merits in terms of providing a starting point. And I can add only this, that I know that intelligence gathering, that partnership working, that connectivity that was a real strength for us through the crisis is displayed through the whole of this document. The key thing for us will be to make sure that we as the politicians help with the decisions we have to make on issues and choices around where our priorities will be, and that we ensure for our part that the decisions we make to help our officers use resources well are judged by their impact on recovery. And that increasingly will mean, let's be frank, the impact upon economic activity social loss and social challenge, and employment, which is connected to both of those. So, Chair, I recommend it accordingly, and I pass to colleagues to add their own voices.
Thank you, David. It's a paper that has had contributions from all of us, in particular yourself and Julie taking on this work. But I'd say also that it's been constructive. Thank you to the ideas of Councillor Bourne that we have a cross-party leaders recovery meeting, which is informal and feeds back to groups, but also feeds forward information from councillors and ideas from the public about how we get through the recovery period and how we build back better. So in terms of contributions, many people have helped inform what we're doing going forward. And that's our sort of open and transparent way. And we want to do it so we invest in our borough and support businesses going forward, support communities. So over to Julie, who wants to speak, just to give her angle on this paper.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think this very much sets out the framework that we've put in place to support our work on recovery. And I think we don't underestimate the task that's ahead of us. You only have to reflect on the news that we've had today about Colchester Institute pulling out of the Minories. Job losses at Debenhams were announced this week, to know that it's going to be really difficult for residents of Colchester going forward, and for businesses and organisations to survive this COVID crisis. So I completely agree that we need to build back better. That's what we're setting out to do. We need to have a sharp eye on climate change, which I know we're all very keen to focus on. We need to see how we can work better with partners, how we can make the town centre especially safe, to make sure our residents have confidence about coming back and to shop and enjoy the town centre. And we need to work with our county council, and as I know we will be, in terms of our walking and cycling agenda going forward. As much as COVID has presented us huge challenges, there is some opportunity to do things differently. And I think the grasp that people have gathered around digital, and maybe that's something that we can support them in terms of educating and helping them to self-serve in the future. And as we've mentioned before, we've got strengthened relationships both in our volunteering capacity and with other organisations, and we mustn't let go of those new relationships that we've formed. We had them there already, but I think that they have strengthened during this crisis, and that's to be welcomed. So, you know, I'm enthusiastic about, but not complacent about, the task that's before us. It will be a huge piece of work for this administration to carry this work through, but I'm sure us that are around the table are very keen to see is positively moving forward and using our resources to the best way we possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I completely agree with your sentiments and wholeheartedly with the environmental concerns, because that for me is a personal mission, and I think we have to ensure, despite this crisis, that we understand the biggest crisis we face is the climate emergency, and addressing that, which we have been doing, and some of this crisis has disrupted that, but in a positive sense, as we've seen, pollution limits, pollution targets, pollution just going down in general, people using polluting transport less, people walking, people cycling more. So we've talked previously about Essex County Council, working with them. Sometimes we wish we had more of our own destiny in our hands to make some of these changes, but we will, as an organisation, lead in the borough on environmental change, biodiversity, encouragement and increasing that across the borough. There's many things that across the recovery piece I want to ensure have fundamental sustainability at their heart and improve our environment going forward, not continue to degrade. So I will move to Councillor Fox, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think this paper provides us with an excellent opportunity to deliver on that recovery that Councillor King and Councillor Young have been talking about. It's been tough and it's going to remain tough for people, but I think what this paper begins to set out is what our priorities are. And for me, they're about jobs, they're about homes, and they're about supporting those most in need. And it's about us as a borough council using our weight and our initiative to invest in our local community and local economy. And so particularly from that housing perspective, it's about increasing our current programme of house building. It's about support for local contractors in the local economy, investing locally and retaining that wealth in the community. And it's about jobs for our local community too. And in particular for young people who are likely to be one of the hardest hit groups as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown. I think it's also about encouraging others to invest with us as well, and really working in partnership. And for me, that is one of the key drivers for garden communities. What garden communities do is that they bring that investment that other parts of the country just won't be getting. We've already seen £100 million worth of investment, and we need to retain that, and we need to build on it. As Julie said, it's about delivering that green recovery as well. It's about working with others, and it's about building on the community spirit that we've seen.
Thank you, Adam. I do agree in the priorities that you have about jobs, investment in our communities to ensure we get the businesses going, we keep the ones that we have, and ensure that none of them struggle as much as possible, but also to focus on housing and shelter so people have that accommodation, which is so fundamental to a healthy life. Moving on, I do not have any other speakers at this point, so I will go straight to the vote. Just pause. I have no other hands. So if you're able to move to the vote, and Andrew, if you could do that for us, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So 2 recommendations on this report. At 2.1, to note the contents of this report, and at 2.2, to agree the approach outlined above and in the detail of this report is adopted by Cabinet. So going to the vote, Chair. Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins? 4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan?
4.
4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we can now move on to the next report. So thank you again for all of that, those contributions. Item 9, the appointment of UK Power Networks for utility works relating to the Energy Centre and associated developments at Northern Gateway, the south side. So Councillor Higgins, this is your portfolio. It's a fantastic story that keeps moving forward, and hopefully we can successfully complete this appointment so we can get on with the heat network and the energy centre up there. So hopefully you can tell us about the positives of that, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corey. Yes, it is a great positive story. Can I first of all thank all the staff who've been working hard on this, and also to our contractors who are still working on the whole projects. This is to award the contract to UK Power Networks, and the works will form the main electricity infrastructure for the south sites, including the housing site, the health campus and the commercial buildings, via the proposed energy centre. And it's also the hub for the 6.7 million sustainable low carbon heat network that will provide renewable energy for the new developments. Can I say, Chairman, that this will help our green credentials, our environmental credentials, by having sustainable low carbon heat network. And the advantage of UK Power Network taking this on is that they will own the infrastructure and be responsible for its upkeep. in the future in case of any repairs being necessary. So I commend the report to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. So this is giving giving responsibility to go ahead with the contractor. I am very excited about this project because we were just talking about the priorities post-COVID, and one of them being the environmental aspects. This is a revolutionary piece of technology on the scale that it is, that Colchester Borough Council are the only one out of approximately 10 bidders across the country who are doing this in a renewable sense, a wholly renewable sense, with only backup gas generators. So this energy centre will be radical for Colchester, powering businesses, homes, and part of the sports leisure sites up there. So thank you for monitoring this going forward. This is the next step on the radical change for Northern Gateway to see green ground source heat pumps working, and another way in which the government has decided specifically to back us as a forward-thinking authority on this project to allow us to invest in Colchester, to invest in green energy and a brighter, safer and cleaner future for us all. So are there any other comments from councillors, or are we happy to support this going forward? Seems like nods, so we'll go to the official vote. Andrew Weavers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You've got two recommendations to vote on. 2.1, to appoint UK Power Networks to proceed with the design and installation of the mains power infrastructure to the Colchester Northern Gateway South site, noting the financial information in the related confidential report. And recommendation 2.2, to approve the contract award as an exception under the contract procedure rules. So proceeding to the vote, Chairman. Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford Vaughan?
4.
4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Unanimous support for a very good project. So let's move on to the next item, which Councillor King will be presenting for us. And if I can just say, Councillor King, if you remember the comment made by Councillor Gocher, before I do move to that to you, I will take another councillor speaker and a submission from Councillor Crowe as well. So item 9, 2 little eyes, update on the commercial developments in the town centre. So it's an update on matters relating to the alumni development at Queen Street, and it's quite clear in the report what is happening. It's not a major change. It is as it seems. So I will go to Councillor Barber. Let me just check you're on the
Hello.
call. And,
good evening. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Excellent.
I can hear you, so I'll move straight to you.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening on this matter. I know a couple of emails have been exchanged, so hopefully we can clear the air, maybe get some answers this evening on this matter, because of a couple of references in the paper that I have concerns on, and I just want to clarify the intentions of the Cabinet going forward. If I draw your attention to paragraphs 5.3 and 5.5 in particular of the agenda item throughout my comments here, and I think the starting point really is the contract that, if you cast your mind back, the Cabinet openly and freely entered into with Alumno, which included the clause that the council would use its best endeavours to ensure that the development would go ahead. That was a clause confirmed in the contract. And I'm sure the Cabinet, as they entered into the contract, will be aware this is a particularly onerous condition of a contract that places the obligation on CBC to view the issue from the perspective of the receiver of the obligation, in this case, Alumno. So when making decisions, you have to view it from the interests of Alumno as part of the meaning of the clause. So that is obviously quite onerous terms. And there's a few, and I've run this by a few lawyer friends as well today, because I was unaware of these powers. I looked up a bit of them by chance. I was revising something around this today. So it was a good use of my time to check everything through. But in particular, the use of section 122 to appropriate the land. And I recognise here it stipulates that this would be if this was for right-of-way negotiations, and if these fell through, then the council would use section 122 to appropriate the land. I'm sure you're aware, and it's in fact referenced in the paper at 5.5, that in appropriating the land, you unlock section 203 of the Housing and Planning Act, which gives the authority the right or the power to overwrite third-party rights on the land, such as restrictive covenants and easements. The issue I have, and as well, the issue I have is that the council are going down potentially this path, and in doing so will unlock the section 203 powers, and because of the onerous clause in the contract, would then be required to use section 203 to overwrite the restrictive covenant of Essex County Council, whether inadvertently or purposely. That's my fear, and it's a risk I want to flag up, see presumably that it's been discussed and you're aware of it, and to just be clear what exactly the discussions you've had with Alumno are on this, and what pressure they may be putting on the council to adhere to that onerous term in the contract, and whether you have had discussions about their intention to push the council to use section 203 to override Essex County Council's restrictive covenant on the land, because that could be an inadvertent side effect of you appropriating the land and unlocking that particular power. So I guess my starting point on my question would just be flag this risk who I've spoken to lawyers about today to check whether my interpretation was correct. I'm sure Andrew Weavers can jump in and give his thoughts, but it is a concern of mine that we are going down this path and could lead to this situation where Alumno have the ability to put pressure on us because of the condition in the contract to have to use section 203 to override the restrictive covenant of Essex County Council. And the restrictive covenant is referred to in 5.5, and third party rights, and the particular condition, although not specified the wording, is referenced in 5.3 of the agenda paper 2. Well, it's Neil Cameron, who is a well-known QC for Landmark Chambers, specified that the use of section 122 is primarily used to take advantage of the overriding powers from section 203. So I guess the first question for now is to confirm that you are not, and Alumno have not said to the council in any capacity that they expect the council or will they won't expect the council to use section 203 to override the interests of Essex County Council. If you can confirm that you have no intention to use section 203 to override Essex County Council's restrictive covenant at any point, that would be, I think, most welcome. And then if there's, depending on your answer, then I may have some follow-up questions in my 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor King has very helpfully emailed Cabinet members today and all members today to explain this situation and perhaps the misunderstanding or the misinformation that the MP was putting out. So, Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lewis, for the questions, plural. We have talked about this before. I'm going to trust that my answer is correct, as you'd expect. And my promise is, if some refinement of it is necessary, then I'll come back to you in the coming day or so. But here's my understanding, addressing the half dozen points you've made. And I'll try to do so in a way that leaves you comfortable on the facts. The first thing is, and there is lots of scope for misunderstanding in the language, and I've said to you before, I've used these terms contractually in a past life. So best and reasonable endeavours, you're right, very different. There is case law and best practice behind each of those and what they might mean. And I'll leave that to lawyers such as yourself and colleagues to enjoy. But my understanding is that rightly, best endeavours is more demanding, and as you described it, puts more of a requirement to demonstrate that you really have than reasonable endeavours. The contract between the parties, to my understanding, is one of reasonable endeavours, and that's consistent with what actually I believe is good practice, which is that you enter into an undertaking between the parties, and regardless of it being stated, you would do all you reasonably can to deliver your part of the deal. So that's may help you on a real fundamental when you look at fragments of planning law, on which I'm not well placed to make a judgment. But the paper is clear, and it's a technical paper. And as you appreciate, it's about gaining third-party access during construction should the development proceed. That's what this is all about, nothing more than that. It puts an onus on those having those discussions to also act in a reasonable way, alive to overall good practice. So I don't think the points around sections 122 and sections 203 and 204, given that we're talking about reasonable endeavours, I think we can look at them in a different kind of way. So we will do what we should do. We have had in the past conversations with Essex County Council. We no doubt will have them again. They will be reasonable conversations with a partner local authority and a partner local authority with whom we have relationships from my view of good quality, as they should be, and we will act reasonably with them as we will act reasonably with alumni. We are absolutely not, to use your words, under a pressure, under any form of onerous obligation to alumni. We are a contracted party. We will do what we need to do. This paper addresses the technicalities of access to rights, so that if the development is given the approval to proceed, it can. That's all that's about. And the way in which we will address your issue, which is different, which is the covenant, is, as I've said, in a reasonable fashion with a partner local authority. How alumni will see that will be for them. We will be as we should be, a good contracting party. We'd expect the same for them. And the ins and outs of the discussions that we will have, respectfully, are for the contracting parties. They're not for a blow-by-blow public account. I hope I've given you some assurance that this is an equitable relationship contractually, and it will be conducted, has been conducted in my brief glimpses of it, in the right kind of manner, the right kind of spirit to the terms that we've agreed.
Thank you, David. So I think it's fairly clear that we're working positively with the County Council and positively with alumni. And it is down to the County Council to lift that covenant, and we will make reasonable endeavours, as you say, to work with them, which we are doing. And that is where it ends. And this paper is just an update on what would happen if the County Council were to lift that covenant. Councillor Barber.
Thank you. And just to confirm that on 21st of January 2020, Governance Audit Committee did confirm that the clause is best endeavours, not reasonable endeavours. And this was confirmed in an email to me the following day as well. So I would just be wary of your actions, because it is not reasonable endeavours according to the council's own papers. And it's not, therefore, whether, basically the question is, can you just confirm this evening that you will not use the powers in the Housing and Planning Act if the land is appropriated to override Essex County Council's restricted covenant if they do not consent to lifting it? I just think that that confirmation is needed because the reality is the contract says best endeavours from the information the council has provided to me, which does place an additional burden. And whether you think or not that's what you want to do, Section 122 opens up that power. It's been confirmed in numerous Court of Appeal practice notes. It opens up Section 203 powers, which means that if you don't want to breach the clause, you may be compelled by the other contracting party to override the restrictive covenant. So I want to just warn you early on, from what I've spoken to people in the industry, this is how they viewed it.
Okay,
so I just want you to be aware that's what the contract says, and that's the implication of the statutes that you reference in the paper.
Councillor King.
I want that confirmation.
Thank you. Thank you. I hear what you say. My promise remains the same. I'll search for the segment that I would swear that I had. And we will find out whether we have inefficiently provided incorrect understanding before, but I'll make sure that we are absolutely clear about it. To your specific, which is what I think is driving all of this conversation, I can only sort of say what I know, which is there is nothing, and I said it before, there's nothing in the approach that we're taken which is about seeking to force the hand of the county council in the way that you have described. This, we have had an understanding, we have had an agreement which has been aired about the lifting of the covenant, and the approach, to the best of my knowledge, has been to ask the county council to give us a response to our request, which is to the terms that have already been agreed with them many moons ago. But I do understand, we all understand on Cabinet, we've heard it truly, that there is a depth of feeling around alumni, and it's plain. All we can do is say that we are playing this in a straight fashion. So when I emailed members to say that we are not, as has been said today, taking legal action against Essex County Council, that's the fact. And there is, to my knowledge, been no such suggestion, but that's not where we're at. This is about partnership working. And as I say again, regardless of this or that contractual language on which I'll give a clarification, we're doing this as we should do it, as a partner with alumni and as a partner for the benefits that keep getting forgotten, and as a partner with Essex County Council. So we'll just have to wait and see how this plays. This is all too premature and overstated from my perspective, but I'm not dismissing that it matters to many people. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King, and it does matter to many people. We have had contact for a number of residents, and you've tried to reply to most of them that come to you. You might want to mute as your clock comes on again, but I think it's pretty clear, and it was clear in terms of the information you gave councillors today, which I respect. Have Councillor Lilly, please. Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I have to say that I was incredibly disappointed and quite disgusted by our MP's so-called comments on Twitter today, saying that we were going to sue Essex County Council, and then tweeting that all over the place. And I think that this is probably an opportunity for Councillor Barber to disassociate him with those remarks, because I believe that he shared the comments and probably liked it as well. And he knows now that it's totally incorrect. We're not going to sue Essex County Council. We are just talking to Essex County Council. It's their decision to make him. The Conservative Party very keen on reporting people to the monitoring officer and the police for making inopportune remarks on Twitter. So why should the MP be so different to everybody else in print of what he's done today? So I'll be happy for Councillor Barber to actually to apologise for his party's representative on the remarks that he made on Twitter today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Councillor Barber indicated.
If you'd like me to come back on that, the MP referenced legal action, which is not necessarily suing, and Section 203 would be taking legal action to override the restrictive covenant. So that was what it was in reference to. And that will be the implications of it, as I said, whether that's our fear. So,
well, no, what Councillor Lilly is saying is, do you disassociate yourself with him saying we were going to take legal action against Essex County Council, which is not true?
Well, no, but the implications of the papers that are
No, we've made it clear.
the result of the actions. This is what I'm trying to stress you. I'm trying to help. The result of the actions that you take by appropriating the land will open up Section 203, which the council may be then compelled through the clause in the contract to use to take legal action to override.
We understand that. Thank you, and I appreciate you bringing that.
Try and help.
I appreciate that, but we're trying to help as well by getting rid of disinformation and misinformation that is being put out for political gain. Councillor King, I think we'll come back to you when Councillor Barber, you're going to read out Councillor Crow's statement.
Oh yeah, sorry, I haven't got that. Did you? Well, I better do it, Ben. I first. Sorry, I'm not prepared on that one. Bear with me.
Well, let's make sure it's a correct statement. So I'll wait for you to get it. Don't want any more misinformation out there, do we?
Oh, Mark, you didn't make me laugh. Hold on 1 second. Okay, where are we going? Okay, are you ready? Good. This is from Councillor Simon Crow, who is Castle Ward Councillor for the Conservatives in relation to this item. And obviously reference to Councillor Crow. I'm extremely concerned that under cover of the global coronavirus crisis that has seen so many of Colchester's residents following the government's restrictions and locking down for months in their homes, the council has been pressing ahead with plans to build hundreds of student rooms in the former bus park. The council is well aware by now just how unpopular the scheme is, yet we now learn that they plan to use taxpayers' money on legal action to remove the restrictive covenant that was put in place to prevent just such a development. There's been no mention of this in public, instead it has been learned about from the agenda. I find it extraordinary that our local authority may be considering this kind of action over another local authority and at taxpayers' expense at any time, let alone when it suffers millions of pounds in losses due to global pandemic. It has been alarmingly clear over the past several months that the council has got itself into an unholy mess over this extremely unpopular student room development on such an important town centre site, and its desperation not to fall foul of its agreement with the developer will stop at nothing to push it through, all for a paltry income of £4,000 a year. And Colchester's taxpayers will pick up the bill and pay a further price once these unwanted buildings are shoehorned into the site, and the opportunity to create something of value in the promised cultural quarter is lost for generations.
Thank you. I think it's clear we've given the answers already to explain that, but I will allow Councillor King to do it again.
Thank you. And just to close off our exchanges, Lewis, I take it absolutely in the spirit that you've written it, that if you take one line of legal logic, you could end up with the kind of conclusion that you've described. But I hope I've given you some assurance, even if I will come back to you specifically on best versus reasonable, what our approach is, and I hope that will hold the ground for now. In terms of Councillor Simon Crow's remarks, let me just briefly address each of these. I mean, his observations around working through the crisis, well, we've been scrupulous on social distancing. Our priorities have been clear: to implement government policy in the fullest manner, set an example in what we do, from support to business to help to the most vulnerable. This is no different. It's an important part of usual business, and to the extent that progress can be made, that's absolutely right that we should make it. But we keep to the rules that govern us all. The suggestion that we plan to use taxpayers' money on legal aid against ECC, well, we talked about that. It's not true. It has been suggested, and I understand a bit more about why, but it's not correct. They're our partner, and I can only speak for what I can see and what I know. Our intent is not to proceed in that way. As our partner, we hope that they will fulfil what was agreed, but it is in their court. It is, from our perspective, their decision. And then we really get down to the value of what we're doing, and a tough word, paltry. This does deserve 2 minutes, and I hope you'll bear with it, and I hope that those who feel strongly, and we really do understand why, will allow for the fact that there is an alternative view on this. The case for development of a long derelict site, for which well before my time, the council could find no real alternatives, is clearly a powerful one. £1 million is not a paltry sum. It will unlock and enable other investment to the benefit of residents. and to our visitors. The development itself would bring a £40 million investment. It would be a statement of confidence at a critical time for local economy. It will bring footfall into the town. It includes the development of a hotel, as you will know, and other public space. And it will bring jobs. Those jobs will really matter to those working on that through that period, and for those who will help run those facilities afterwards. And I think really lost sight of, and we had a conversation around the Minories earlier, the town, lots of businesses in the town have had a tough time, and many of them, when they unlock, will have a tough time for quite a while as well, much as we might hope otherwise. This development, if it goes ahead, will be a real boost to nearby businesses who've struggled and been further weakened by the crisis. So I know the answer to Councillor Crowe, I hope he'll accept, is not to see this as not mattering, but to see this as really mattering. It's not paltry, it is significant. That if it does go ahead, and I understand the case against it, there are real tangible gains and benefits and a significant contribution to recovery as we enter into recession. So that will be my response to him. If he's listening or if he hears it, I hope he will find that reasoned one. And Chair, we have got one other outstanding piece, which is Councillor Gocher. Shall I address that as well?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Mark's made a point, which I understand, he's pointed to, I wouldn't use his language, but he's pointed to the contradictions between seeking to lift the covenant and the fact that we supported the planning committees in their stance at the inquiry after planning permission was refused by our own council committee. It looks a contradiction, but it's actually just doing the right and decent and democratic thing. So the council has entered into this agreement, for disliked by some, as we understand. Our duty is to follow through on that, but we stopped still. We did the right thing in providing professional and independent support at the inquiry to the planning committee's position. And so it is a contradiction, but it is one consistent with the democratic process that we have. And returning to where we were, the clear inspector's judgment having been given and planning permission having been granted, we go back to, in my understanding, the reasonable endeavours, certainly the contracting good practice of going back to where we were, and with that being in place to then follow through. So we cannot stop doing what we promised to do, which was to make our best efforts, our reasonable endeavours to secure the covenant's release. But as I've said before, that matter lies with the county.
Thank you, Councillor King. Thank you for your patience on that. I'll just bring in the Chief Executive Officer, Adrian Pritchard, just to confirm where he believes we stand with some of that contractual arrangements. Adrian, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say, Councillor Barber referenced the scrutiny panel, and I believe I was at the scrutiny panel that evening, and I was responding to have your say on the matter, and I used the word best endeavours at that meeting. What I then subsequently did was I went away and I checked it in the agreement, and I believe I sent an email to councillors informing them that it is not best endeavours, it is reasonable endeavours. However, having said that, I will go away again and I will check yet again, and I will then make sure that I or the monitoring officer email all councillors to be very clear about reasonable endeavours or best endeavours. I hope that helps, Chairman.
It does help. We have to be absolutely clear and repeat it again so that we don't have, as I say before, misinformation. We need to be absolutely sure ourselves, and it's right, and it's helpful that we have constructive criticism and comments coming forward. So I appreciate the questions this evening that we've had from all councillors. So thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor King. So are we happy to move ahead with this report, bearing in mind those comments made by the Chief Executive comments made by Councillor King and questions from others, which do give us reason to think and ensure that we do carry out the relationships we have with Alumno and Essex County Council without any hopeful legal wranglings. We work together in partnership with no need for that. Thank you. Can we move to a vote? So, Andrew Weavers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So there are 3 recommendations. 2.1, to note the commencement of informal negotiations with various rights-of-way holders surrounding the Alumno development. 2.2, to agree that final terms and completion of the variation of rights-of-way holders be delegated to the Director, Policy and Place and the Portfolio Holder for Business and Resources. And 2.3, to note that a subsequent report will be submitted to Cabinet, if required, seeking approval to appropriate the land for planning purposes under the provisions of Section 122(1) of the Local Government Act 1972. And proceed to the vote, Chairman. Councillor Vox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford Vaughan?
4.
4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, that's agreed. Thank you, Andrew. Moving on. Okay, so the next item we have is item 10, little I, which is Colchester Positive Parking Review, pre-consultation draft. Councillor Mike Lilly, please, for a brief update on this.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Sorry, distracted by the cat, just turned up here. I think she looks hungry. Yeah, it's all in the report. I won't go through it all. We've been here before. It is we took it to scrutiny and the recommendations are in there. I think we're all happy with that to take it forward, to look at the strategy. Times have changed since the scrutiny meeting. And as we know, the car parks have been completely empty around the borough. Although I believe that the ones in Dedham and Mersey have been full up with people now every weekend. Yeah, so we'll take this forward, and so that's all I've got to say. But on another matter that come out today, and there'll be a press release tomorrow, in a way of parking strategy and positive parking, we are working with the bid and shops and things for parking. We have announced today, we'll be announcing tomorrow, that there's going to be a bid put forward to give parkers more time for the money they spend. Nothing's going to go up in that respect, but they will have 50% more time to park in our car parks around the borough from June the 6th. And we're also helping out blue badge holders by increasing the time they could park in our car parks up to 5 hours. It's an extra 2 hours free of charge for blue badge holders. That should come out in the next couple of weeks. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mike. 2 very welcome points on top of the paper actually there, giving people more time as we come out of this crisis to help them recover their normal habits, but also to help businesses. I think that's a positive. But we also encourage people to travel in, of course, by bike, walk, or electric car as well. So thank you for that, Mike. And this is about consultation going forward, and it's also positive to see you've talked about the scrutiny recommendations too. Okay, can we just checking whether we have any other indications? I have a helicopter going overhead and maybe some distraction of sound, but apart from that, I can't see any other hands, so I'll move straight to the vote. Andrew Weavers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So we have 6 recommendations from the scrutiny panel to Cabinet. A, that it considers ways in which to influence shop opening times to ease congestion at current peak times. B, ensures that CCTV coverage is extended across all car parks. C, commissions a wider study and report on modal shift. D, considers pursuing devolution of the park and ride scheme. E, considers ways to manage expectations and provide education on the trade-offs involved between car park pricing, congestion and air quality. And finally, F, directs that paragraph 3 of the foreword to the easy read summary be deleted. So I'll go straight to the vote if you're agreeable, Chairman.
Yeah, I feel just can I just ask you, actually, Councillor Lilly, you were happy with those recommendations, just to confirm, weren't you?
Oh, we are very happy with the recommendations.
Thank you. Sorry, back to you, Andrew.
Fine. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Lilly.
4.
4. Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
4.
4. Councillor Young.
4.
4. And Councillor Corey.
4.
4. That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weavers. I'll just say that officers have worked quickly just on the item about alumno to double check and check again. And I'm very pleased to say they've already come up with an answer. It is reasonable endeavours, despite what people keep continuing to say, which unfortunately is either misunderstanding or misinformation. It is reasonable endeavours. Can I just ask Adrian Pritchard, I am right, I have read that message correctly. Could you just come in and confirm that, please?
Chair, that is correct. And as I say, I may well have started that confusion at scrutiny, and I apologise for that, but I thought I had corrected it within a matter of days, having done it.
Thank you, and that will be communicated to councillors. The monitoring officer, Andrew Weavers, will confirm that, hopefully, perhaps alongside you, Adrian. Good to clear that up. Now we can move forward. The next item, I believe, was from the Public Initiatives panel about fireworks, and this recommendation for them to look into that. And I would be happy to support this recommendation that approval be given to investigate ways for council to reduce antisocial uses of fireworks and allow the Policy and Public Initiative panel to add this to the work programme. I'd be happy for this. I'm aware I don't have pets myself, but friends who do find that they're often affected. Also wildlife, natural habitats, hedgehogs who might be affected when people are firing loud fireworks nearby. So for me, it's about environmental concerns as well as antisocial concerns. And I'd be happy to support it. Hopefully all councillors feel the same. I have an indication from Teresa. So Councillor Higgins, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, for this. Yes, just to reiterate that it's actually quite important that we do investigate ways, because I know that lots of people have got pets, and some of the social media stuff that I get is, oh God, you know, fireworks have gone off again. I'm trying to get my dog, you know, quietened and my cat quietened, and also my kids are going to bed. And much as we've applauded the clapping for the NHS, in certain areas fireworks are going off as well, which are not really planned, and people are getting quite upset. So I think it's important that we do look into this. And I know Councillor Scott Bittell has been very keen on this, and I think it's important that we do follow up this suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Lilly, your portfolio holder, sort of for communities, I think relates to this. So over to you.
It does, and it's very near to my heart as well. We're all animal lovers. It is pretty terrifying now. The fireworks have got much louder. They've got a lot more bigger explosions. And it's not just, if it was just held on one night, on bonfire night, like it's supposed to be, on November the 5th, which is what it's all about, it wouldn't be too bad. But it's 10 days before and weeks afterwards there. They just carry on and carry on. And it does affect a lot of elderly people have animals for companions, and it's distressing to see those animals running around scared out of their wits because people are letting fireworks all the time, and it is getting worse. It's time now to actually have controlled displays in areas. A lot of people go to these displays now, far better for families, and I believe it's the right thing to support this this motion. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mike. And in other countries, some Scandinavian countries, they have it permitted in terms of use of fireworks twice a year. I think something like that would be positive for wildlife, but that's more of a national change in policy. Are we happy to accept this onto the work programme for the Public Initiatives panel? I'd be very happy to. No other indications, so I'll move straight to the vote. Andrew Weavers, please.
I mean, as you have sort of read out the recommendation, I'll go straight to the vote and not read it out. So, Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lilly?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford-Horn? 4. 4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Excellent. No fireworks tonight. Moving on to the next item. Gosbecks Archaeological Park, item 11, little I. I'll move straight to Councillor Young, who can give us a brief update on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. I'd like to start by paying tribute to the hard work of the Heritage and Tourism Task and Finish Group. Over the course of their existence, they came up with some great ideas, not least the lighting up of our historical assets, which have made such a contribution to the way the town centre looks at night time. At their last meeting, they reviewed and endorsed the Heritage Live priorities in our strategic plan and have agreed the activities for 2020/21. They also acknowledge that we have a finite budget because of COVID. This will come under further pressure, as we've discussed this evening. In relation to our very historical important site of Gosbecks, the independent Paddy McNulty report gave us a range of options, and we commissioned the report on the understanding that it was unlikely that we could move forward immediately or indeed very quickly, Leader. So there's 2 recommendations there from the Task and Finish group that I'm happy to endorse. But I think they will be set against our other priorities that we may wish to fund in the future. I personally would like to see the Gosbecks site used much more than it is currently utilised. It's predominantly a dog walking area. But I've had actually this evening, haven't had a chance to respond to it, but I got an email from somebody who was interested in putting on some historical shows there. So, you know, in terms of our social distancing, that might be something we can look at, and I will respond to her in due course. But I do think it would be nice to make more of that site. But of course, as I said, you know, we have a finite resource. We're in difficult times financially at the moment. Probably can't move forward very quickly on the recommendations. Finally, I would like to say this will be the final report from that Heritage Task and Finish group, and to reiterate my thanks to all councillors that have been involved. But I know that across the chamber, the support for making more of our historical assets will continue, and I welcome that.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Very clear, and I support your ambitions going forward. I think to make more of the site at Gosbecks, I do think that would be an interesting sort of investigation to carry out. But as you say, with the limitations we have at the moment on the COVID sort of budgets, so let's see what we can achieve. Are we in support? I seem to see no indications otherwise, so I'll just pause, but no other indications. So I would suggest we move to the vote to support the recommendations and the words of Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just read out the recommendations for you. Consideration be given to further investigation of the archaeological site and its significance in partnership with a suitable higher education partner, and the need for further development of the archaeological site at Gosbecks Park be recognised and consideration be given to improving the heritage value of the park by the addition of facilities, including a small visitor centre. Go to the vote, Chair. So, Councillor Fox.
For.
For. Councillor Goss.
For.
For. Councillor Higgins.
For.
For. Councillor King.
For.
For. Councillor Lilly.
For.
For. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan.
For.
For. Councillor Young.
For.
For. Councillor Corey.
For.
For. That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Excellent. Thank you, Julie. Moving on to item 12, which is item 12 little I, the appointments to the Revolving Investment Fund Committee, to outside bodies and to council groups. So this has been through all parties. All parties have an opportunity to appoint to certain groups and to change as and when they feel necessary and at the municipal year changeover. So we've had some updates to this. There have been some changes from each group, which we can now see in the paper. And really, it's about updating this, indicating that we are supportive of those roles. And really, I don't see any further discussion needed on this. I'll just check if there's any hands up, which I think there are none. So that means we are likely happy with all the appointments that are going to happen, and the public can see this item to see who represents them on different institutions around the borough, outside of just the council and inside on some of our committees. So I'll move to the vote. So Andrew, please be ready. I see no indications from councillors, so I believe we're ready to vote on this.
Chairman, if you just bear with me and I'll just go through the full recommendations. 2.1, the membership of the Revolving Investment Fund Committee for the 2021 municipal year be as follows: Councillor Corey, Councillor Higgins, Councillor King and Councillor Young. 2.2, the representatives to the various external organisations and council groups listed in Appendix A be appointed for the 2021 municipal year, with such appointments to cease if representatives cease to be members of the council during the municipal year. 2.3, to authorise the leader of the council to make a determination where a nomination is deemed to be in dispute if a vacancy occurs or if an appointment needs to be made to a new organisation during the course of the municipal year. And finally, 2.4, to note the reports about the work undertaken by appointees to external organisations in 2019-20 as set out in Appendix B. Go to the vote. Councillor Fox.
For.
For. Councillor Goss.
For.
For. Councillor Higgins.
For.
For. Councillor King. Chiming. For. Councillor Lilly.
For.
For. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan. For. Councillor Young.
You've got to get rid of that bonging, David, but for from me.
For. And Councillor Corey.
For.
For. That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I think a new appointment for Chief of the Bells will go to Councillor King. Moving on to progress of responses from the public. Richard, as our Democratic Officer, could you update us on how they've gone?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that all the presentations made by members of the public at relevant meetings have been answered.
Excellent, that's a positive. So thank you for that. So we can move on. Oh no, we do need to vote on that. Apologies. Can we move to the vote, please, Andrew?
Yeah, Councillor Fox.
For.
For. Councillor Goss.
For.
For. Councillor Higgins.
For.
For. Councillor King.
For.
For. Councillor Lilly.
For.
For. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan. For. Councillor Young.
For.
For. And Councillor Corey.
For.
For. That's unanimous. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And then we move to the exclusion of the public, which typically I'd ask the Deputy Leader to read out. I'm happy to do it, Julie, if you cannot see it in front of you.
I've got it ready, Mark, if you'd like me to do it.
Perfect, Julie, away you go.
Okay, so exclusion of the public in accordance with section 100A, open brackets 4, close brackets, of the Local Government Act 1972, in accordance with the local authorities' executive arrangements, meetings and access to information, England, Regulations 2012, to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting so that any items containing exempt information, for example, personal, financial or legal advice, in Part B of this agenda, printed on yellow paper, can be decided. Exempt information is defined in section 1001 and schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Once the resolution to exclude the public from the meeting has been approved, the live broadcast of the meeting will cease. A separate online meeting will be convened on Microsoft Teams for the consideration of the Part B items.
Thank you, Julie. That's pretty clear. So this ends this part of the meeting, and we will quickly move to the private part of the meeting in order to address those confidential items. Thank you. Richard, is that acceptable? We just need to vote on it, I think, actually. Andrew?
Yes,
Thank
you do need to vote. Sorry. Councillor Fox?
4.
4. Councillor Goss?
4.
4. Councillor Higgins?
4.
4. Councillor King?
4.
4. Councillor Lee?
4.
4. Councillor Luxford-Vaughan?
4.
4. Councillor Young?
4.
4. And Councillor Corey?
4.
4. That's unanimous, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. We can end the meeting here. Richard, if you're able to end the feed.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll cease the feed and cease the recording. And we'll join you on Microsoft Teams in just a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. See you all there shortly for a short meeting.